TikTok, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. It's your friendly neighborhood philosopher here, D. Wood, and back by popular demand. People ask me all the time, Robert.
Is that right?
Yeah, people ask me
I
all the
just,
time. What's
I've
up?
been so snowed under with work. I have not even looked at Video World at all. So I have no idea what's going on. People ask you about this week in jihad.
Yeah, even though I've explained it like 8 billion times, there's always someone who
Yes.
didn't see
And
my response to someone else, so they ask again. And yeah, I tell them, guys, Robert is, well, he's not getting any younger. Let's put it like that. Um, sadly, we're not getting any younger here. Um,
yes.
and I'm a little younger than you, Robert, but even 49-year-old D Wood is nothing compared to 35-year-old D Wood. A topic would pop up, 35-year-old D Wood would stay up all night long,
hmm
uh, preparing the content, then record it the next day, and then edit it and post it. And old D Wood can't do that anymore. Can't do that anymore. But yeah, I tell him, Robert's got some stuff that he has to finish and book projects that he has to get done, and so doing a bunch of shows, even though it was only an hour show, that was a lot of work to prepare for because you're preparing all the stuff and the graphics you want to use and stuff like that, and all that for a bunch of ungrateful.
Oh, well, it's just, you're absolutely right. It's a matter of only so many hours in the day, and diminishing energy on my part, unfortunately. And ultimately, I have to look at the fact that where my abilities lie is in writing, and got a, as people used to say, got a face for radio and all that. So it's it was easy thing to say, well, I'll just stop the videos for a while, but I actually have heard from people, and I appreciate it, and I love you all. And I'm sure David is doing far greater videos than I could ever make in any case. And so you're all this is being held up very well, but I'll drop in whenever possible. Hoping to write a few more books before I'm done. Have a few things in mind. There is one coming out in the spring that I think will be of great interest, called The Tragedy of Islam: Failure and Excuses, How Islam is Bad for Individuals and Bad for Societies in a way that I don't think anybody's looked at before. And that, I'm excited about that one. It's a book I've wanted to write for years. And meanwhile, we got The Holy Hell, David. Tonight is Holy Hell Night here in Videoland.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, this week in jihad, that's kind of the big picture is always relevant, but we would always cover the stuff that happened that
Mhm.
week, and so it's not as relevant as like a book that's going to last for forever. And so, yeah. So
Yes.
guys had to prioritize the stuff that lasts. And the real takeaway from this week in jihad is the same as the takeaway from when I read your book, History of Jihad, and it was
hmm
you really. That's where you really see how relentless it is, because I've said it before. Even people like me who've been debating Muslims for for many years now and done tons of debates on jihad and jihad related topics. Um, all I ever really studied was the Quran, the Hadith, and Muhammad, and the short term aftermath and so on, the early conquest and so on, and then recent stuff with terrorist attacks like since 9/11, and never really paid much attention to everything that happened in between. And that's what you did in the history of jihad. Is that's when you see that this just never stop. It never stops. The only time it stopped from advancing is when people made it stop, and then it was just endless terrorist attacks and so on. But you really see how relentless it is, and that was kind of the takeaway of this week in jihad. Is just every single week you could endless terrorist attacks.
Yeah, and if people do want to know what the daily news is. I'm still doing that at jihadwatch.org. You got to read it. It ain't a video, but it's all there. Every story that we ever covered in This Week in Jihad was all at jihadwatch.org in greater detail, and you can find those stories still at jihadwatch.org every day. And yeah, you're right. You know, David, I hadn't really thought about it, but I think the book, The History of Jihad, is kind of like This Week in Jihad from the 7th century to the 21st.
Yep.
It's the same kind of idea, but it's if I do say so myself, I think it's a book that you should read, you should have, because like David said, you're not going to get this information for the most part. Apologetics online has dealt with Muhammad, dealt with the Quran, and that's all great. That's very important. But then there's skip 1400 years and come up to terrorist attacks nowadays. And people don't realize, I think a lot of people, even still, who know what the Quran teaches and know what Muhammad is depicted as teaching, they still think that there were periods of peace and tolerance. And that's because there's been a whole lot of big lies that are still taught about the history of Islam. Islamic apologists have been very careful about this, and most Americans don't know history at all. And so they think there were times when it was all peaceful, times when everything was great, and we all got along wonderfully. The history of jihad shows that was not true ever, that there was no place that ever happened, that anywhere Muslims came, they came violently and they subjugated the non-Muslims.
Yeah, I have to say, if you listen to kids on college campuses to this day and so on, it's Islam came along and was just minding its own business, and then a bunch of Europeans decided to launch the Crusades because they were all jealous of Islam, and then they wound up and started fighting and killing and slaughtering, and then after that there was just quiet. There was just quiet up until the United States and European nations started horribly mistreating poor people in the Middle East and so on, and this caused a reluctant reaction from the Muslim world, where they just said, we're just tired of it. We're tired of all these. We don't want to fight. We don't want anything. We just want to mind our own business. But these guys won't leave. These Western powers won't leave us alone, and they're treating us horribly. And then you get a couple of terrorists, which is entirely to be expected, because you can only push people so far, Robert. That's what I hear.
Another thing that's connected to that, David, is the whole the what is it? How do you say this? I've never said this word, but I've read it a lot. Groiper?
Yeah, Groiper. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and Robert, there's a
what
saying.
Does that even mean?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the name they came up with, but yeah, there's an old saying: never make fun of a man who mispronounces a word. It means he learned it from reading.
That's very true. That's very true in many contexts. I've had that happen to me, particularly with Arabic words, and I think, well, I used to actually be in daily contact with Arabic speakers, but that's been like 10 years now, and most of the time I'm reading words that I never say. I say it, and they say, "Oh, he doesn't know anything about Islam because he didn't say it right." This is a weak and stupid argument, because it just means that you're dealing with somebody who's read a thing in a book and maybe studied it in great depth, but not had conversations. In any case, the Groypers, they say it's all our fault, essentially, like David was saying, and that we have to withdraw from particularly supporting Israel, as well as any kind of presence in the Middle East, and then they'll be fine. Everything will be fine. If we stop bothering them, they'll stop bothering us, right? That if we just stop interfering, this Iraq and Afghanistan, there's no doubt those were horribly conceived, and they were horribly executed and horribly ended. Big mistakes all the way through. You can read another book of mine, Who Lost Afghanistan, about that. But in any case, the idea, though, that if we leave them alone, they'll leave us alone, is based on ignorance of Islamic theology and ignorance of the Quran. And so you got to know what you're dealing with. The history of jihad shows there's never been a time of peace and never will be. because the Quran and Muhammad teach warfare against unbelievers. And
And
instead of dealing with that, Western authorities are ignoring it, just like they are in this case of what we're supposed to be talking about tonight.
yeah, and this is all especially relevant now because now you have this push because keep in mind the Groypers and so on, they claim to be on the right of things. But now you also have like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, and these guys are going pretty hardcore. Islam's got a bad rap. Islam's got a bad rap, and it's the Jews who are trying to convince us that Islam is the problem. And it's always funny because I'll hear from whenever I'm talking about um, you know jihadis that Western nations have basically invited into Western nations, and then who do jihad things in Western nations. When I point that out, people say, "You
Mm-hmm.
see, this is because the Jews are bringing these people in because they want to spread Islam and conquer you with Islam." It's like, okay, so these are the master. You're telling me these are these masterminds, and so they're the ones who are spreading Islam. The Jews are spreading Islam to take over the world, and this just happens to be the group that is most hell bent on exterminating Jews. And these are the masterminds. It's like you can't have it, but you can't have it both ways. Either these masterminds who are controlling everything in the entire world, and they're really smart, or they're so insanely stupid that they're like, "Hey, let's help spread the ideology that calls for our annihilation and extermination. Let's do that." Like, okay, pick one. If you want to say they're really, really stupid, okay. If you want to say they're the ultimate masterminds, but you guys are kind of having it both ways on all of this. So anyway, the point here, guys, is these are actually really dangerous times because if you go back 20, a little over 20 years when I was getting started, Robert was already going strong and exposing this stuff. But back then, everyone said we're wrong. Everyone said we're wrong. And it was a small handful of people being blasted by everyone. We were catching it from jihadis who were either telling us we're Islamophobes or threatening to brutally murder us in the name of Allah. We were catching it from atheists because, well, you guys are religious too, so how dare you condemn this other religion? And we were catching it from Christians. Hey, you're being mean. You're hurting people's feelings. That's the one unforgivable sin, really, in Christianity is hurting other people's feelings and not being nice. And so just just completely attacked from every single direction. And then what I noticed over the next 15 years was people's minds started changing, and when their minds were changing, it was usually agreeing with us because we're the ones who had endless piles of evidence to share, and people usually weren't familiar with what's in the sources. And so they would hear, "Oh, Islam is wonderful, and Islam is all about human rights and women's rights and stuff like this." And we quote a bunch of stuff, and they wouldn't know what to do with it. But eventually, they'd realize there's a problem. You get all the way down to our time when you got the avalanche of apostasy and Islam is being exposed, and now all of a sudden you've got a minority, but you have a bunch of people on the right and among conservatives now who are telling us, no, Islam's actually good. Muslims are actually got a completely bad rap, and it's the Jews who are behind it. And so now people on the right sound like people on the left, and I have to say on the right, but people on the right tended to catch on more quickly back in the day. But now there's this big push. Nope, 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 nope. Islam good. Islam good. Anyone who makes you think otherwise is paid by the Jews.
Yeah, I remember way back, man, when I was first speaking about these things publicly, uh, and people would come up and or there'd be news coverage or whatever, and they'd say far right. Some of this far right guy came along and said there was some problem with Islam and jihad. And I remember saying in the early 2000s and even in the 90s, this is not a left right issue. This is a civilizational defense issue. This is not an issue that is right or far right or anything of the kind. And nobody paid any attention. Everybody just dismissed that and said, this guy is far right. I think I'm still far right in Wikipedia. And anybody who, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, who's very much on the left in terms of social issues, he's far right because he opposes the Islamization of Europe. And so this is just what they decided to call everybody who opposes jihad violence, because it's the one big meaningless hate word that they can throw around, and you can't really do anything about it. They're not saying you're a member of some specific group. They're just saying you're on the far right, which is a scary term for people, even though there's really no content to it. But now even people who have been termed far right in the past are saying it's all made up. Candace Owens said the other day that the GOP, the Republican Party, is trying to give people the impression that there's a threat from radical Islam. Now, of course, you and I know there's no radical Islam. The radical Islam is ordinary Islam. It's the established mainstream primary form of Islam that calls for warfare against unbelievers and their subjugation. But she was saying the real problem is, of course, the Jews and Israel. And anybody who might be tempted to think maybe they've got a point, Candace and Tucker and these people, formerly on the far right, and now I guess I don't know what they are now. They're going to have to make up new smear words for everybody. But in any case, this is one of the reasons why jihadwatch.org is necessary. Once again, if I do say so myself, it's mountains of evidence, 90,000 some posts now for 22 years, mountains of evidence that there is jihad activity, that there is a jihad threat. You ask yourself, read some of it and ask yourself, okay, how can I understand this as an Israeli false flag? And you'd come out thinking Mossad is the most resourceful, powerful, well-heeled, smartest organization in the world. If they can pull off all this jihad everywhere. But of course, it's ridiculous. And you got to wonder, why would they be making up jihad in Thailand or the Philippines or
They're
Burma,
super smart.
someplace? Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And they've got all the evidences there with documentation, mostly from mainstream news sources, that even in spite of themselves, sometimes they have to report on these things. They don't talk about the ideology. We fill that in. But they do have to acknowledge that the attack happened. And so all this Groyper business and this growing skepticism regarding jihad is completely refuted if you look at that and look at some of the recent books like Holy Hell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so way back in the day, 20 plus years ago, people were telling us about Islam and coming up with all these beautiful quotations. There's no compulsion in religion. And if anyone kills a man, it's as if he's killed all mankind and so on. That was their proof. What did we have on our side? Well, we had what the Quran actually says in context. We had the Muslim sources. We had 14 centuries of jihad and endless terrorist attacks around the world constantly going on. So it was a weird situation. All the evidence was on our side. And what did our critics have? Trust me, bro. We know what's really going on. So yeah, guys, these are pretty dangerous times, that this is going to spread again, that Islam is not behind this. So now it's back then it was just, oh yeah, these poor guys are disgruntled because Western nations have been so mean. Now it's just the Jews. The Jews are behind it. The Jews are behind everything. Rough stuff. So guys, this is it's important. Don't think, well, people have caught on now, and so our work is done. Nope, work still needs to continue. We have the most important comment of the day. David, you are handsome. This is true, but David is also married, so inspired better. Lower your gaze. That will be the only that would be the only Islamic teaching I'll agree with today. Let's take these first couple of super chats, Robert, and then we're going to jump right into Robert's new book, which you all have to get. And should and Robert, you've pointed no. Well, I'll just wait a couple seconds because well, anyway, Robert's pointed out this is not assuming any prior knowledge. This is really good stuff for even people who aren't familiar with any of this stuff. It's a good starting point, guys. A good starting point because it's an issue that's relevant to lots of people, and you still have people trying to figure out what's going on with these grooming gangs. And so many people say it has nothing to do with Islam, but I mean, it looks like it's got something to do with Islam here. So anyway, we'll check that out in a second. But Master of the Al Zut, do you know if you will be coming to speak anywhere the Northwest anytime soon? Would like to meet you sometime. Can't think of anything that's scheduled right now. Only thing I got coming up that's close by is DebateCon, but I think that's in Texas. So, say AP looks a bit wiser than usual today. Well, pretty much anyone would look wiser than AP. Demonic influence over Muslims and others isn't some general and vague supernatural evil thing. Demons systematically manipulate the minds, thoughts, beliefs, and emotions of billions of people. It's from Nordine. Nordine keeps telling us that we need to focus just on demonic stuff all the time. Understanding that is crucial for apologists. More thinking is required to figure out how this scheme can be destroyed. Well, I have to say, confronting demonic forces, that's not
I
the
don't know
realm
if
of,
that's
that's
a
not the
matter
realm
of
of
thinking.
apologetics.
That's a matter for prayer.
Yeah, that's not
Nordine,
apologetics.
you may be completely right. I do think that you are right to a tremendous degree. This is a demonic entity we're dealing with. These are people under demonic influence who have been led to believe, like the prophet Isaiah says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. These are the people we're dealing with, and the people who think they're serving God and are killing the people of God. And so that the Lord spoke about. And so this is a demonic thing, but that doesn't call for strategies and approaches. That just calls for prayer, for fasting, and for perseverance in the faith on our own part, and all of the intellectual work that David's doing, that I'm doing, that other people are doing. This is just part of it, and the other part is the spiritual aspect. But when you're talking about the spiritual aspect, it's not about strategizing. It's just we know what to do. We just have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Ottoman sign armistice 30th of October. Coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. The 30th, it represents the 30 men of Al Zut. If that could be, this is Nordine again. If that could be achieved, I believe it's going to result in a major breakthrough in counter-Islam apologetics. You're talking about two different areas right now. 1 Corinthians 3, do you not know that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, which temple you are.
Can't argue with that, David.
Mm-hmm. You should put together a short video for Nux Taku explaining how Muhammad received his revelations from Jibreel in a cave, thought he was possessed, tried to off himself, and would have seizures. Yeah, Robert, Nux Taku is this big channel that's been learning about Islam lately by reacting to videos about Muhammad's death and what Islam. Today it was what the Quran says about Jews and stuff like that. But he's watching videos that I made in the past and so on, that others made in the past, and bringing it to a new audience. But it's pretty cool.
That's great.
Poem. Thank the Lord for our freedom in God, purchased in part by a history of jihad. Yeah, there were people asking about the poem, so they went ahead and provided one.
Thank you. I don't have one today. I forgot all about that, tell you the truth.
Robert, has your support of Israel affected relations with fellow Orthodox Christians? It seems a lot of us are pressured to side with Palestine and overlook Hamas and jihad.
Yeah, this has been a lot of trouble. There's no doubt about that. You can look online. Well, it's kind of died down now, but Jay Dyer, you know Jay Dyer perhaps from when he had a big altercation with AP, and then he had a discussion with David and AP. I don't know if anything's happened since then, but one night, I don't know what was going on, but I was minding my own business. But I did make a reference to Ortho Bros on Twitter, and he came at me, demanded that I debate him immediately about whether the U.S. ever created false flag fake jihad attacks. Now, I've written extensively about this, about the U.S. government aiding jihad attacks, because I was the target of one. They were jihadis from uh, where were they from? Phoenix,
Yep.
and they
Vocab
went.
knew one of them. Vocab knew one of them. Matter of fact, Vocab knew one of them, and that
That's
was kind of
right,
the basis of Islamicize Me. Was we made it comical. The real story was not funny, but we made it funny.
exactly. So these two guys came from Phoenix to Garland, Texas, to kill us all at the Muhammad Art Exhibit and Cartoon Contest that I was the co-sponsor of with Pamela Geller, and we were there. They tried to get in and shoot us, and they were stopped by our security. They were killed themselves. But it turned out, we found out a year after this, that the FBI was communicating with the jihadis, was encouraging them, egging them on, saying, tear up Texas, and followed them into the parking lot. Very suspicious. They have stonewalled all inquiries since then, gave flimsy excuses for some of the behavior of their undercover guy, and that's been that. But the point is that I said all this quickly, not as in as much detail because it's Twitter, to Jay Dyer, saying, "Yeah, I've never denied that the U.S. government's been involved with jihad attacks." And he said, "Oh, you expect me to know something that you wrote 10 years ago?" And just completely unhinged. And I was saying, "Yeah, I agree with this. How can I debate it with you when I know that happens? Doesn't happen all the time, and it doesn't mean there's no jihad, but it does happen." And he just wouldn't hear of it and went off in a shower of personal abuse and attacks. And meanwhile, other Orthodox Christians have come at me saying that the fathers of the church, they are against the Jews, and therefore we have to be against the Jews. And I think that if you try to sustain a position that the fathers of the church are correct in all things and infallible in matters of faith, like the Pope in Catholicism, you're going to run into a lot of contradictions and a lot of absurdities. And I believe that the fathers of the church are full of wisdom and should be revered in that regard, and their intercessions requested in prayer and all of that. And what they say about the Jews has to be understood in terms of their time, place, and situation, and also in light of other things in the teachings, in the basic teachings of the church. Like, it seems to me that a lot of these ortho bros think you don't have any obligation to charity when it comes to Jews because they're the evil enemies of God who crucified the Lord, or something like that. And this it seems to me to be astonishing that anybody would think this. But in any case, there have been people who are saying we're going to write to Archbishop Elpidophoros. I'm in the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, and Archbishop Elpidophoros is the bishop, and they're going to say he should excommunicate me for supporting Israel. And I think, what you guys live in a very small bubble.
Mm-hmm.
This is not how this is
Yeah, they think
not how the world works.
they think Twitter decides these things, and then
Yes.
it's really weird, Robert. Apart from some of the online orthobros who are just flat out idiots, if you talk to anyone who's like serious, like actually thinking through this seriously, they're almost always attacking. They're almost always attacking based on some position that you don't even hold. They think when they hear, oh, hey, you got Hamas and Israel and stuff, and hey, I'm on Israel's side here. They think you're saying something about Christian Zionism and and they always assume that. And when you actually say what you really mean, this has been my experience. When you actually say what you really mean, hey, I'm thinking in terms of human rights. Under no circumstances should a group like Hamas win in this. And they want to wipe out Israel and take over. And that's what from the river to the sea actually means. And they're calling for globalizing the Intifada and things like that. And are you for these guys wiping out Israel. Oh, no, 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 no. Who do you think Christians are better with Israel now, or if Hamas took over? Which do you think
Mm-hmm.
Christians would be better off with? Oh, yeah, they'd be better off. They'd be better off with Israel. So, what in the blue hell do you think we're saying here? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're agreeing with us on the things we're actually saying usually. So anyway, weird times.
A lot of these ortho bros, they do think that anybody who supports Israel who's a Christian is a Christian Zionist. So that is somebody who reads the scriptures and believes that they contain a mandate for Christians to support the modern day state of Israel. And they say that is illegitimate because the church is the new Israel. They hold to a total replacement theology that some of the fathers taught. And therefore, no state of Israel can be supported because it's not really Israel. And I think this is just playing games with names. Even if you call Israel some other name, call it Palestine, which is what the region was called before that. They were actually strongly considering doing that. The Palestinians hadn't been invented yet when the state of Israel was founded in 1948. So call it whatever you want. Call it blue. Call it whatever you want. The fact is that it doesn't mean that these, if you don't like the name, does not mean that the people can be lawfully or morally annihilated, which is what would happen if Hamas took over. And the whole theology, in the first place, I believe that St. Paul doesn't even teach replacement theology. In Romans, it's a difficult thing to understand, and there's a lot of disagreements about the meaning of it, but he's very clear that he says God has not rejected his people, whom he foreknew. And so if God has not rejected his people, then they're still in some way related to all of the things that are going on in terms of salvation. I am not saying you don't need to have Jesus to be saved or something of that kind. I am not saying anything about that at all. I'm just saying that the situation in the New Testament is not open and shut, that you can say the Jews are rejected and thus cast off. This is not, I don't think, what it says. And the ortho bros act as if it is. And then you have the complete ignoring of why I do support Israel and why other people like me support Israel, which has to do with, like David was saying, the human rights, the actual ownership of the land, which passed from the Ottoman Empire that fell to the League of Nations, which decreed that it would be for a Jewish national home. Well, what's the Jewish national home? Anyway, there's a whole lot more to this, but these are some of the problems why the Ortho Bros don't like me and I don't like them, but I am still an Orthodox Christian and not, to my knowledge, been excommunicated, unless they did it today and haven't gotten me word yet.
Yep. You and AP. Take both of you out at the same time. Nooks Taku said David looks like a guy that's been through things as a young guy. A couple. Dennis Prager in his last interview, his being able to talk, a miracle. Did you ever run into Dennis Prager over the years, Robert?
Yeah. Dennis Prager is somebody that I have met on numerous occasions, and he's a very great man. And I'm deeply honored and proud to say that my book, Anti-Semitism, History and Myth, he said that it was the best book on anti-Semitism, full stop, that it's the go-to book on it. So
you heard it here, folks.
That's it. I don't have it right next to me to hold up, but the publishers put his words there right on the front because it was very, very strong words, high praise. So thank you for that, Dennis, and continued prayers for your full recovery.
Looks like the Muslims in Nigeria got Trump's Christmas present shipped by U.S. Missile Express. Oh, yeah, there was a question for you coming up. Hang on. That's why I wanted to do the super chats real quick. Thank you guys for your work. Robert, does your book provide source references? Thanks.
Every book of mine provides source references.
No one has references like Robert.
Because I know that this is a very controversial area, the whole thing, everything I've ever written about. And there are Muslims out there who say all the time, you are a liar. The Quran does not say to kill. You know, they actually have the audacity to say something like that when the Quran says to kill over and over again. because they know that most non-Muslims have not read it, don't care to read it, aren't going to read it, and will believe what a Muslim says about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they lie like dogs. And so I document everything I say in every book, is very carefully footnoted, and you can follow all the sources, check my work and see. And people have written me over the years and said, I didn't believe anything. I thought, I'm going to refute this guy. I'm going to check all his references and show where he's all wrong. And then I realized you were right.
Yeah, guys, it's very important. Again, we have tons of people trying to mislead everyone, and so sources really, really handy to have. And Robert's books are super helpful for that. Groiper just sounds like a verb for the minimal zut. Example: the minimal zut groiped Momo's moon all night long. Yeah, me and AP usually say gropers.
There you go.
Here's Nordine again saying, please pray for my liberation. Everyone can pray for Nordine. I resent the term far right. Call us far correct.
That's not bad. I like that.
Okay, yeah. Here, Robert, you have your old friend Abu Bakr al Puff Daddy, who says, Mr. Spencer, support or oppose U.S. airstrikes in Nigeria?
Yeah, my answer is yes. No, seriously, look, this is the problem. The U.S. strikes Nigeria. Some jihadis maybe get killed, or at least their installations are put out of service. And then what happens? The jihad ends? No. There will be more jihad. The Iraq war went on how many years? 13, 15 years. The Afghanistan war gave me 20-some years, went on for 20-some years. So and then as soon as, look at in Afghanistan in particular, we went in to topple the Taliban, and 20 years later we leave, and who takes over? The Taliban. The jihadis are fighting a 1400-year war. They are extremely patient. So I don't think it is a good use of resource. We are not. The administration's going to change, and they will come in and give money to the Nigerian jihadis. And you think they won't? Oh no, they would never do that. Why not? The U.S. government gave money to the jihadis in Syria, gave money to the Taliban after we left Afghanistan. Why not? And so the thing that we need to do is what we're doing here, and what I'm trying to do in books, and what other people are doing in their various ways. What we have to do is to confront and destroy the demonic ideology, and that will end the jihad. Otherwise, all they did in Nigeria was show that Trump was not making an empty threat, and maybe he set them back a few weeks. But they got plenty of money because they got rich oil billionaires funding them. They got all the weaponry. When we were doing this week in jihad, David, you remember how it was a recurring thing that I would point out, that they beat the National Army repeatedly in Nigeria, in Niger, in Tanzania, in Mozambique, in Somalia, in Sudan, in Mali. Always the jihadis are better equipped, better trained, and better funded than the national armies. And so one airstrike in Nigeria is not the slightest bit of difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll have to see if it actually leads to anything positive, but we'll see what happens. Regime change government and of Qatar, yay or nay? You mean forcibly change the government? No, that doesn't tend to work very well. I would say just quit letting them buy up everything, and kind of expose them. It's weird, Robert. Everything that everyone accuses Israel of doing, these masterminds behind the scenes, just flooding everything with money to get their way. It's what Qatar does.
Yeah. And so if we stop pretending they're an American ally and stop allowing them to bankroll U.S. universities and everything else, that would be a big, a huge, a huge boon. And mind you, I'm not saying in all this that I'm against any kind of intervention, but we should be playing smart. Why isn't the U.S. government trying to fight jihad on the ideological front? And why? Because it doesn't want to offend Muslims, mm-hmm. and doesn't want to make them think that Islam is the enemy. And yet, the Saudis and all these other people that are ostensibly our friends, they know very well that the jihadis are the enemy, and they fight them themselves, because they would topple the House of Saud. They would topple the King of Jordan and so on if they had a chance. And so, why can't we go to them and say, look, we have to deal with this ideological threat just like you do?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that it could be done. But the US government does not deal in the slightest degree with the ideology, and so it keeps proliferating in the US and everywhere else. And a couple of airstrikes are not going to make that change.
Yeah, and even a couple of government changes and so on would not make that change. And so, guys, it's actually very simple. The defenses of Islam and saying Islam's actually great and it's other things are the problem and so on. That stuff only works in an atmosphere of ignorance. And so it's either you get rid of the atmosphere of, if you get rid of the atmosphere of ignorance so that all this becomes common knowledge and people understand what they're up against, and then people can elect officials and and basically choose journalists. Keep in mind, if people catch on and your news network does not tell the truth, guess what? They'll pay attention to a news network that does tell the truth, and your news network will go out of business and so on. So, guys, we actually have the power here, but you just have tons of ignorance. If so, at the end of the day, get rid of the atmosphere of ignorance and let this stuff become common knowledge, and you win. You win. If you don't, if there's just general ignorance about Islam, you lose, and it doesn't matter what else you do. It doesn't matter else. That's the battle, and that's why we're here talking about the latest book from Robert Spencer. You could have your own library, Robert, just on the books you've written. But a couple more real quick, and then we'll jump into it. Greetings to you both. I'm a Muslim. I appreciate your works. Why aren't these important points about Islam in public space and public debates everywhere? And how can these topics be more public? The West has media influence.
Well, see, this is the thing. If the U.S. government was behind this, look, I remember my dad. You remember my dad? He worked at the Voice of America. And the Voice of America, he explained to me, I'm like 9 years old, and he explained to me that one of the main things they did was broadcast into the Soviet Union and communist China. And they would broadcast about the errors, the weaknesses, the human rights abuses of communism. They would broadcast good things about America, and they were tackling the ideology head on. Now, where is the U.S. government, the Voice of America for that matter? The Voice of America now, it's practically Al Jazeera, government funded. It's not tackling the ideology. No government agency is tackling the ideology behind jihad violence. And so the West has media influence, but nobody in the media dares to say anything true about Islam, because they're either bought by Qatar or they're afraid of Qatar and the others. And so we have to have some people who have a big media presence who are not afraid.
Recently, TV news in Edmonton, Canada featured a hijab-wearing women's soccer team led by a Muslim immigrant from Lebanon, but is not sports haram. That's going to depend on which scholar you go to. Look at the assassination of Franz Ferdinand happening by accident after failure. Need to print the Western politicians' Quran with only good verses.
It would be like a page.
Yeah. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. Book of Revelation. Islam, perhaps? Well, you could think of.
I always hesitate to say this in the Bible is this. People have been doing that for centuries, and they've said a lot of crazy things that seem plausible in their time, but then those threats pass away and other things go on.
Mm-hmm. Orthodox, that's a good name. Well, it sucks because you have very cool Orthodox Christians, but it's just this weird mutant thing on Twitter right now that's giving them a bad name, and it's interesting because a lot of the guys, as soon as they get into a debate, turn out usually not to know a lot about anything, including their Orthodox faith. May you please see Nefarious. It's about a demon-possessed death row inmate that challenges his atheist psychologist on his atheism. Huh. That's interesting. I don't know how someone can read Paul's letters and think Christians should be anti-Semitic. Yep, Paul seemed to be. I mean, Paul said he'd give up his life and salvation for his fellow Jews. Hi, Mr. Wood. Hey, how's it going? O prophet, lower thy izar and bend forth, for Zut Allah has chosen them. Disobey, and they shall beat your bare flesh. Verily, it is permitted. You missed a lot of Zut jokes, Robert. over the past couple months.
I don't know how I've survived.
Uh, Robert, you give me father and disciplinarian vibes, keeping apologists in line. You've kind of dropped
Yikes.
the ball. You've kind of dropped the ball with AP and D Wood. That's right, definitely with AP.
I don't know what's been going on, folks, so I can't comment.
The man's been writing. Give him a break. That was a super sticker. Thanks. And apostate of Allah. She's an ex-Muslim. I'm not a dispensationalist. I'm also not a
Christian nationalist.
okay, but I noticed orthobros and groypers never read Romans 11. Did they take a Sharpie to it? Yeah, they kind of mock like AP and stuff when he brings that stuff up.
That was exactly the point I was making. Yes, that's it. Romans 11 is key to this, and they seem to ignore that it exists.
All right, Robert. Did want to go through those because people haven't seen you in a while, and so they wanted your thoughts on some things. So that was cool. But now we have this, Robert.
Holy hell!
Holy hell! That's going to be the new catchphrase for 2026, ladies and gentlemen. Holy hell!
Well, you see how it's the perfect title for a book like this.
I really like the subtitle as well. So you got holy hell, and it's hell, and it's in two senses. It's like life here is hell, but then you know the afterlife, whether they go to hell or to Islamic paradise, it sucks either way for the women. And so it's just holy hell for them. It's hell on earth, and it's hell in the afterlife, whether they go to hell or whether they go to Islamic paradise, where they'll basically be sitting around as their husbands spend eternity deflowering virgins, and they have to approve of all this. But the subtitle, Islam's Abuse of Women and the Infidels Who Enable It. The Infidels Who Enable It. All right, Robert. So you cover a lot of topics. You cover a lot of topics in your book. Why don't we go ahead and start off with, what do you think? Grooming gang issues and some of that stuff in the UK.
Yeah.
But it's not just in the UK.
It's not. It's the grooming gangs in the UK that made me think I should write this book, because there's really so much to that there is the decades of women being brutalized, victimized, their lives destroyed, hundreds of thousands, maybe over 1 million women, and authorities routinely waved them away, wouldn't do a thing because they didn't want to be Islamophobic. And so you've got Islam's abuse of women and the infidels who enable it right there. And even to this day, even right now in December 2025, is it? December 2025. Even right now, if you stand up in Britain and say this is a Muslim problem, this is a problem with the teachings of Islam about the Milik al-Yamin, who are the captives of the right hand, the women who are non-Muslims who are taken and used sexually, and this is allowed in the Quran. If you were to do that in Britain today, there would be all kinds of people saying, this is terrible. We have this terrible problem with Islamophobia to this day in Britain. And they still haven't faced what they're dealing with. I've got it in the book that 8 years ago now, there was a member of the Labour shadow cabinet at that time. Now Labour's in power, the leftist party. But in those days, the Labour was out of power, so they had a shadow cabinet. I think it's a cool thing they have in Britain, where every member of the cabinet, the opposition party picks somebody who's the shadow minister of that particular department, and they're always carping about how the guy in power is doing it wrong. And so Sarah Champion was a member of Parliament and a member of Labour's shadow cabinet, and she said, excuse me, she said the grooming gangs are largely Pakistani in origin. And there was a big, huge uproar, and she had to resign from the shadow cabinet. And she apologized, and she said, I didn't mean anything about Islam. There are Pakistani Christians who were involved, which they weren't. And see, this, I think it epitomizes that you can't talk, even now you can't talk about it. Anybody who gets close even gets shouted down and destroyed. And I also show in the book it's happening not just in Britain but all over the world. It's something that comes out of the Islamic world where it happens on a routine basis for women who aren't covered properly or considered to be covered properly, and non-Muslim women in Muslim areas like Hindu women in India, in areas where there are a lot of Muslims, as well as Christian women in Egypt, and so on. And so this is a global phenomenon that everybody's afraid to talk about except us.
Yeah, and it's that's why the complicity of the infidels, as your subtitle puts it, is essential. I mean, if you had a government that wasn't completely idiotic and that took its main job, the main job of a government is to protect its people. Like if you could do nothing else as a government, you would have to protect your citizens, and they'll just offer up an endless supply of young girls just for the sake of not being called names. I mean, my goodness. I mean,
Yeah,
you should be done. You should be done. It's like we will.
yeah,
You should never have the slightest bit of power over anyone if you are the sort of person who would allow girls to be groomed, raped, gang raped, drugged, pimped, and you just say, "Well, I don't want to be called names." Okay, done, done. We never want to hear one word out of you ever again. Go do something else. Go do something else. You can be a farmer or something
and
like
yet
that.
all those people are still in power. All those people are still there or promoted. Keir Starmer was the chief prosecutor at the time when a lot of the grooming gangs, the rape gangs, started to actually get arrested. And still very few have been prosecuted. But he was the one who quashed a lot of the prosecutions, and now he's prime minister.
Yeah, and I think Tommy's been pointing this out and so on. It's like the trials they actually have, where I mean, we'll see them, and we'll see lots of people, and we'll see the big picture where they compile all them and so on. It's like dropping the bucket. These guys are dropping the bucket, and it's for
Mm-hmm.
show. It's so you think we actually dealt with the problem, and they're not. It's, oh look, yeah, we rounded up these guys. Okay, what about the what about the thousands of others who are doing this sort of things? And you know it. And Tommy pointed out that if they even tried to arrest them all, like you couldn't. They don't have the prison space to
Mm-hmm.
arrest all the guys who were involved in these rape gangs and so on. But yeah, everyone, this is sort of the relevance of understanding what's in Islam, because I'll still see it. I'll still see it whenever anyone brings up the grooming gangs. Muslims will respond in an atmosphere of ignorance. And they'll say, no, 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 Islam, no, Islam only allows sex between husband and wife. These guys are not acting in accordance with Islam. And then, of course, you point out, what are you talking about? You believe in taking captives and having sex slaves and things like that. And they'll say, oh, yeah, 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 that's after we conquer a people. That's after we conquer a people. But we haven't conquered the UK. And like, well, I mean, you kind of are if they're sitting there letting you do it. But yeah, the issue here, everyone who's watching, is Muslims 13, 14 centuries ago had no concept of a nation that would just give you all their daughters and say, yeah, do whatever you want to them. We don't want to be called names. Of course people would fight so that you can't take their daughter. Of course they would fight. And so you'd have to fight the war so that you got these captives and sex slaves.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have an idea of, look, there will be modern nations that say, here, take them all, take them all. Just, just don't call us names. Don't call us Islamophobes. Don't call us racist. They had no concept of that. If they had,
Well,
things would have been way easier for them back then. They wouldn't even had to fight the. Oh yeah, just give us all your girls, and then we're all good.
nor did they have a concept of mass migration, that they could just walk into these countries in Europe. They didn't have to bring an invading army. They could just send their invading army and say, "We're needy refugees, please help." And the doors are open to them. They go on welfare. They get everything handed to them, including the nation's women. And so the oh shoot, I'm sorry, flew out of my old man's head. Whatever it was, go ahead.
That happens. That happens.
Oh,
Oh, all right. So grooming gangs, kind of the perfect example of Islam's abuse of women, and in this case, girls. And you've got the ones who enable it. So, guys, it's
Hmm. Yep, and that's what the book's about. Really, it's a if you have somebody who says, "I don't believe this is happening," or "I think you're exaggerating it," or it's mostly because there's so many lies, and I clear through the lies in this book. Uh, People say it's mostly white British guys who did the rapes. They are far more likely to be rapists than Muslim men. This is what the British government said a few years ago. It was completely false, and it completely contradicted their own reports. But if you find people saying these kinds of things, this is what this book is designed to help you with. It's really an all purpose resource for the entire issue, showing how it's taught in Islam, not just with the Quran verses all set out and the Hadith, but also with various Islamic scholars saying this is fine, this is things that you should do, and then Islamic authorities from the modern day saying this is something that should be done, and then all the examples from Britain, from Australia, from Sweden, from Germany, from France, from everywhere that this is happening. And so you got somebody skeptical about it, somebody who's living in normie world and not aware of these things. Here's your all-purpose resource to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is happening, that Western governments are enabling it in a criminal degree, and what must be done in order to stop it.
yeah, and I want to point out to people because Robert, a lot of people don't read as much as they did back in the day. A lot of people don't read as
Yeah.
much as they did. And so you got some people going, it's a big old book. I don't want to read. I don't want to sit down and read an entire book when I can just watch videos. I have to point out, guys, that um, a book like this, which is broken down by chapters on topics, on individual topics, you would be doing the world a huge service if you picked a topic. If you got the book, so guys, there's a link to Amazon in the description where you can get the book on Kindle or hard copy. But even if you wanted to learn one topic well, if you wanted to learn one topic well and actually know what the Muslim sources say about this, what Muslim scholars say about this, you will be extremely helpful knowing one topic well. So even if you get it and you just you learn one chapter and you highlight it and you get the sources down, and then you can share those whenever anyone is spouting nonsense about that particular topic on X or something like that, you've got the sources there. You can quote the sources to them. You can quote the scholars to them on that issue. That's huge. That's huge. Even if it's only so, even if that's only a 10-page chapter. But yeah, so if you're still a reader, you want to get it, read it, highlight all the parts that you think are most important for information that you want to share with the world. But even if you don't want to learn all of it, there should. I mean, I'm assuming if you are on this channel right now, you're kind of interested in Islam. If you're watching David Wood and Robert Spencer right now, you probably are concerned about Islam. I have to say, when I'm talking about this stuff has to become common knowledge, that means it can't just be Robert Spencer writing books or D. Wood doing live streams and making videos and stuff. This stuff has to become common knowledge, and that's on you guys. We're doing our part here. Everyone else has to do your part. But let's go ahead and I'm going to check out the topics here, Robert.
Okay.
So you've got your introduction, and that's the West's rape crisis.
That gives you the facts and figures, my friends. That there really is a spike in the rate of rape in the major Western European countries over the last 10 years. And then, not coincidentally, that's when there's been the massive Muslim migrant influx. And so, here again, this is the kind of resource you need, because people will come to you and say, well, there've always been rapes. And there are rapes all over the world. People are raping people all the time. What are you talking about? This is not a special Islamic problem. You're just a hater. And you can give them the direct correlation between the mass Muslim migration and the rape rate. And that's just the beginning.
And It does suck that that's such a common response. Whatever you bring up, wife beating or something. Oh, come on. Yeah, there's always been wife beating.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a difference between a society and a belief system that condemns it, but someone does it anyway, so that the society can then condemn that person for beating his wife and so on. There's a difference between that and an ideology and a system that promotes it and says, do not interfere. If a man's beating his wife, it's none of your business. That's on him. That's on him, and that's his God-given right. There's a difference between. It's just like with all the Dawa guys defending child marriage and so on, and sex with girls. I mean, Daniel Hikikachu defends sex with 4-year-olds, 4 or 5, doesn't matter. And you say, but what about, pedophiles and other places? Okay, there's a difference between an ideology that condemns it and someone breaks the rule and then you punish that person. There's a difference between that and an ideology that justifies it and says it's actually good and that sex with little girls is good and is ordained by God. Completely different scenarios, guys. And yeah, so don't fall for that nonsense. Hey,
Hmm.
Robert, how about I kind of name all these chapters on these different topics, and you give people a quick rundown of what you're covering there, and then we can zero in on a couple of issues. That work?
Okay, great.
Okay, so your introduction, you've got the West's rape crisis, and then chapter 1 is Islam forbids rape, but
And this is important because you will find even to this day, go on Twitter and say something about Islam allowing rape, and you'll get 10 bots telling you Islam forbids rape. Rape is a very big sin. Oh, how could you say this? You were Islamophobic, etc., etc. And yeah, Islam does forbid rape. If a Muslim rapes a Muslim woman in a Muslim country, he's liable to be in big trouble. If it's a Sharia state, he might be at a particular advantage because she probably will not be able to come up with the
won't be able to
requisite
prove it.
witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, as specified in the 24th chapter of the Quran. But it is a crime, no doubt about it. And you can go on to Islam Q&A and all the others and find that it is a crime. But most often, and I show in this chapter that they blame the women anyway and say that women bring this on themselves by not covering themselves properly, and that goes for non-Muslim women, for Muslim women as well as non-Muslim women. Remember that chapter 33 verse 29 of the Quran, is it 30 or 33:59, it says that women should cover so that they're not molested, which is sort of in a backhanded way saying if you're not covered, you're fair game to be molested. And so that is something that many Muslim clerics have themselves said. And I've got some of them here in the this chapter. And above all, of course, the distinction between Islam forbids rape and all the rape going on is the captives of the right hand. And that is a Quranic term in chapter 4 and chapter 23 that refers to non Muslim women. Chapter 33, verse 50 says that they're spoils of war and that these are women that you can have sex with. So there's rape, but then there is having sex with your slave. That's not rape. And you might think, well, that really doesn't have anything to do with it, you Islamophobe, because they're not enslaving the women in Britain when they do this, but there are Islamic justifications that connect the one thing to the other. And that's what I've got in the book that show that this is how pretty much really it's kind of like theft. There was an imam in Sweden some years ago who said, in lieu of the jizya, because the infidels are not paying the jizya, it is licit to steal from them. Think about that when you're reading about this Somali fraud business in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Because the infidels aren't paying what they should be paying, and everything belongs to Allah and by right to the Muslims, you can steal from them. And it's the same thing. These women who are infidels, they really belong by right to the Muslims. And consequently, you can have sex with them and treat them in this way that indicates that they're slaves because that is the natural status they should have in your world.
And Robert, I'm sure you recall the clips. They've pretty much been scrubbed because I would share them on the blog back in the day, back on my
Mhm.
blog, but I would just link to the video where the Muslim scholar was saying it. But then then later on they take down the video, and so it's not there anymore. But you'll remember those scholars mocking the fact that in the West, a husband can actually be charged with raping his wife. And I remember this one scholar, he was saying it, and he's speaking to he's speaking in the mosque, and he goes, "Did you know that in America you can rape your wife?" And it sounded like he was saying it was permissible, like to rape your wife. And you're like, what? What's he
Mhm.
talking about? And he goes, "How can you rape your wife? You have a right. You have a right to her. How can it
Mhm.
be rape? How can it be rape?" So that's when I started getting the idea that they say, "Hey, rape is forbidden in Islam," but they have a different definition of rape. Rape is forcing yourself on someone that you have no right to force yourself
Mhm.
on, right? And so
Yes.
your wife, you can do what you want with her. Your captives and slave girls and so on, you can do what you want with them. There's no concept of rape in that situation. And then again, as Robert pointed out, even if you actually rape someone, if you're talking about Sharia, Robert, under Sharia law, how many guys in these grooming gangs would ever be charged and convicted of rape?
Not a one. It's
Zero.
not rape. It's not rape in Islam
Mm-hmm.
because they're not Muslim.
And
And
even
even with,
okay.
yes, go ahead. You're
Oh, I
going
was
to
going to
say the
say,
same thing.
and even if it were, you could never prove it. This is like
Yep.
Tucker was bragging about. I don't remember what he said, Abu Dhabi or one of these places and stuff. And he said, and they have zero. They have rape rates of zero. And it's like, Robert, haven't we been reading the stories for years about these cities where you get some woman who goes there for vacation, she gets raped, she goes to the police station, and she goes to jail
Oh, yeah,
because
many times.
yep,
Abu Dhabi is notorious for that.
yep. And yeah, so they can't prove it, and so guess what? Women just realize, well, if that happens, there's no point in reporting it even because I'll go to jail. I'll go to jail because here's how it works, guys. And I remember back in the day, what was it like? What percentage of it was of women who are in prison? I think it was most women in prison in
75.
Pakistan. Yeah, 75% of women in prison. I don't know if it's still the case, but back when we saw the statistic, it was 75% of women in prison in Pakistan were in prison for being raped. So here's what happens. You report a rape. Oh, really? Okay, where are all your witnesses? Okay, well, he says it didn't happen, or he says it was consensual, or whatever he says, doesn't matter. You've acknowledged that there was sex, and you cannot prove that it was rape. So guess what? You're going to jail. You're going to prison.
Mhm.
Or if the girl doesn't report it, but she gets pregnant by it, she gets pregnant by her rapist. Well, she can't prove anything against him, but she obviously had sex, and so they end up in prison. It's just really screwed up stuff. And this is Islam. So we
This
got
is
chapter one
Islam.
there. Then we got chapter two, the spoils of war. I'm guessing you're talking
This
about
is,
female captives.
yeah, and this is going through the Quran, going through the history, and going through some contemporary authorities showing that rape is acceptable when it comes to non Muslim women, that it's a weapon of war. And that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about Britain. That these guys, you think they're coming and they're refugees. Don't be naive. They're all young men of military age. They're not bringing their families. I saw a video not long ago. I don't know if you saw this, David. This woman in Ireland, and she's asking these Afghans, you're refugees? Yes. You fleeing a war zone? Yes. Why'd you leave your family there? Why'd you leave your wife there? And they don't have an answer. They say, I don't have time to talk to you. And that's it. And the thing is that this is a war for a lot of them because there is an ongoing war between Muslims and non-Muslims. As far as Muslims are concerned, there is a jihad that doesn't ever end as long as the world is still going. And so, in the context of that war, you can take captives of the war, and then they are indeed the slaves that you can have sexual relations with. And so all this is explained from Islamic theology in here, and it goes into chapter 3, this explanation as well, with modern scholars saying, well, sex slaves are not forbidden by Islam, is the chapter title. And that comes from an Islamic scholar who said this in the 2010s, that this is something that is just a matter of mainstream Islamic theology. You do not find Islamic scholars saying this is terrible. You don't even find what you find with jihad. You know, if you talk about jihad and quote the Quran on jihad, that you get a lot of Muslim scholars and apologists saying, oh, that only has to do with the 7th century. With the captives of the right hand, they don't even say that. It's just they ignore it altogether, or they justify it as a rule.
So we have sex slaves are not forbidden by Islam in chapter 3. And I've even seen, I'm sure you've seen them too, but I've seen women, I've seen Muslimas making videos saying, yes, and this is part of Islam. And of course, our men get to go and take these women as sex slaves. It's their right.
Yes, Salwa al-Mutairi.
Mm.
Salwa al-Mutairi is or was a female politician from Kuwait, and she made a very famous video back in 2011. I quoted at length. The quote goes on. I thought I got to put this all in here. It's just too important. It goes on for like 3 or 4 pages here, pages 35 to 39. It's just Salwa al-Mutairi explaining, like, for example, I was working with this man, a young man, who liked women a lot. I was sympathetic to his situation. So she says, I was given an opportunity to visit Mecca, and when I did so, I brought up this man's situation to the muftis in Mecca, high authority. I told them I had a question, since they were men who specialized in what was halal and what was good and who loved women. I said, what is the law of sex slaves? The mufti said, with the law of sex slaves, there must be a Muslim nation at war with a Christian nation, or a nation which is not of the religion or of the religion of Islam, and there must be prisoners of war. Is this forbidden by Islam? I asked. Absolutely not. Sex slaves are not forbidden by Islam. On the contrary, sex slaves are under a different law than the free woman. It goes on to explain how the law for slaves is different from the law of free women.
And chapter 4, we have a perverted, oppressive ideology, but that's in quotation marks. So you're quoting somebody?
Yeah, this is where I start bringing in the Westerners, the infidels who enable it. And so I quote in terms of ISIS, because ISIS took a lot of sex slaves. You may recall back in 2014 that ISIS was controlling a lot of territory in Iraq and Syria. And they took a lot of infidel women as sex slaves. And there was a big uproar about it. Happened also in Nigeria around the same time. Boko Haram, another jihad group. And Michelle Obama, in that context, held up a famous picture of herself, published a picture of herself holding up a sign saying, "Bring back our girls."
It was very powerful. It changed.
Yeah.
It changed everything for everyone.
The jihadis immediately brought back the girls. I'm kidding, they didn't. And John Kerry, Barack Obama, David Cameron, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, they all said the same kind of thing. These people, well, Cameron says, these extremists pervert the Islamic faith as a way of justifying their warped and barbaric ideology. And all this is designed to give people the impression that Islam does not allow this. But it's all non-Muslims saying it. You're not going to find Muslims saying Islam does not allow this.
Yeah, I pointed out before that Islam is this strange topic where the less you know about it, the more of an expert you are. I mean, there's no other topic like this. Not like the less you know about math, the more of an expert you are in math. But when you get to Islam, and the more ignorant you are, the more you're propped up as some expert. And so, we've had all these politicians and journalists and so on. Telling us when we're quoting the Muslim sources, and we're quoting Muslim scholars and stuff, and we're quoting Muhammad, and we're quoting the Quran and so on. No, you guys don't know what you're talking about, because I have a Muslim friend, and my Muslim friend never tried to subjugate me. So how can you say Islam wants to subjugate the world when my Muslim friend has never shown the slightest inclination to subjugate me? As if Islam is defined by your Muslim friend and not by the sources that we are quoting. And it's the same thing with, with the non-Muslims, with the infidels. It's you guys do not define Islam, and none of your Muslim friends define Islam. The sources we're quoting define Islam, and they all agree with us. And the actual knowledgeable scholars, when they're speaking truthfully, agree with us. Weird situation. But you guys know best because you know nothing.
Yeah, it's like I was just writing about this. King Charles, he delivered his Christmas message the other day, and he says the different faiths they have so very much in common, and one of the things that they have in common is a strong desire for peace and a deep commitment to the equality of all people. And I thought, well, Islam doesn't teach any of that. And has Charles studied Islam? Of course, he has not. He doesn't know a thing about it. It's not that he has an informed opinion based on his study. He just really wishes this were true, and so he assumes that it must be. And that's it. And this is the level we're dealing with the rulers of the Western world.
Really sad. And so, Robert, this is it's kind of weird. I've never actually seen an episode of the show Boardwalk Empire, but it was like the formation, like the early formation of the, like the when the mafia was becoming organized and so on during Prohibition. But anyway, I've watched a ton of YouTube clips from that show, but there's this one funny situation where a guy who's guarding his job is to guard the warehouse where all the illegal liquor is being stored. And this guy goes like to the outhouse or whatever. He goes to the outhouse and someone comes in and steals a bunch of stuff. But they eventually find the guy who stole all this stuff. And then Nookie Thompson, he's like the main character, but he starts talking and he goes, "Okay, you're a thief, right?" He's talking to the guy who stole the liquor. He goes, "You're a thief, right?" And he goes, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. You're a thief. That's how you make your living. That's your job. In this situation, your job is to steal things. And he turns to the other guy, your job is to guard the warehouse. So I ask you, we've got a thief whose entire source of sustenance is to steal things, and a person who's supposed to guard what's in the warehouse. One of those people was doing his job. The other person was not. Who wasn't doing his job in this scenario? So he put more blame on the guy who's supposed to be guarding the warehouse than he did on the guy who is stealing the stuff. But that's matter of fact, I should make a little video out of that because it's a perfect example. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, you've got the jihadis whose job is jihad. That's what they do. That's their entire reason for existing in their mind is to do jihad, to wage jihad as they've been commanded. Part of that is sexually abusing girls and so on, taking captives and so on. The government, your police, your judges, your politicians, their job is to protect your people from those guys happening. So in this situation, who was doing their job and who wasn't doing their job? The jihadis or your government? So there's this weird situation where they're actually more blameworthy than the jihadis and the rapists themselves.
It's like Pope Leo is another one. And the other day he was saying about the jihad in Nigeria that it's really more about economic problems than about Islam. And here again, I was thinking, I read this and I thinking, Pope, really, did you read the Quran to get this idea? Has he ever even?
I heard it.
Yeah,
I heard it somewhere.
He heard innocent people. You kill an innocent person, it's like you've killed the whole world. He heard that somewhere, and that was it. He doesn't know anything about it, and he's just popping off based on what he wishes were true. And this is too high stakes to be playing that kind of game.
Yeah, these are bad times, guys, for people in positions of authority who have massive influence over other people. It's a bad time for people like that to be really, really stupid and to be enabling the people who do this stuff. Chapter 5, you have What Did Muhammad Do? I can guess what that's about.
Yeah, that's people wear those WWMD bracelets, and what would Muhammad do? But we have Muhammad's example. He took sex slaves himself. I tell the celebrated story in here of Safiya bint Huyai,
Mm.
who was the wife of Kinana of Khaybar, and had tortured
Tortured, yeah.
and murdered her husband, killed her father on the battlefield, destroyed her community, killed many of her friends and family, and then he was so taken with her that he raped her right there on the battlefield. And then the Islamic apologists say, no, 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 he married her first. But as David pointed out just a little while ago, force is not a concept. I mean, it's not a problem here. There's no idea that you shouldn't force a woman to have sex with you. That just does not exist in Islam. There are actually specific hadiths in which Muhammad is saying a wife has to have sex with her husband at any time, no matter what, even if she's riding on the back of a camel, even if she's making dinner and it gets burnt on the stove, he has to do it. I mean, she has to go along if he wants her to. And so, if you could do that with a wife, imagine how the sex slaves are.
Yep, not pretty there. So what did Muhammad do? You know what? You know what amazes me about that whole situation
Yeah.
is so so Muhammad. You got that quote. Muhammad liked three things most, and it's perfume, women, and food. Perfume, women, and food. Those were the three things he liked most. But the Battle of Khaybar, that, according to Muslim sources, is where Zainab bint al Harith, a Jewish woman, whose all the men in her family were just slaughtered by the Muslims, and she offers to cook a meal for Muhammad and his companions. And Muhammad's like, yeah, oh yeah, I like lamb. Yeah, bring me some lamb. And then, of course, she poisoned the lamb, and one of Muhammad's companions, Bishr, just turned green and died. But Muhammad, he consumed some of it. It did some internal damage, but he survived another few years, and then eventually he said he died from the poison. But I mean, think about this situation. So Muhammad loves perfume, women, and food. And think about that. You just slaughtered this woman's entire family, and she says, "Hey, let me cook dinner for you." And he's like, "Okay, because I like food." That's how dumb he is, right? And then he almost died. He eventually did die, according to the Muslim sources from this. But his companions see this like, I mean, how do you not conclude this guy's like the biggest idiot on the planet? But then what does he do? Oh, look, here, I just tortured and killed this woman's husband and the rest of the males in her family. Uh, Let me bang her. And then, like, one of his companions actually stands outside the tent to make sure, because this guy understands, wait a minute, this guy seems to have a blind spot when he really wants something. And so this guy stands guard because he thinks this woman's going to kill him. But I mean, imagine you're like, from the perspective of that guy, you giant idiot, you just almost died for some lamb. And now, why'd that woman want to kill you? Why'd that woman want to kill you, Muhammad? Why did she want? Because you just killed all the men in her family. Okay. And here's a woman you're taking to your tent, right? What did you just do to her? Oh, you killed all the men in her family. Do the math here. So, yeah, I mean, if Muslims wanted to make an argument, they should say it's amazing this guy survived as long as he did, as stupid as he was, because that has got to be the stupidest guy ever. Rough stuff. So that's what Muhammad did. He was extremely stupid, but pretty darn terrible towards women. All right.
So I
So,
got in the second part of that chapter, I've got after Muhammad's example, I've got a bunch of Muslim rapists saying they're doing this because it's in the Quran, or they're doing this because it pleases Allah. And it's very clear. You know something, David? I remember years ago when Pamela Geller and I were working together. One time we put up all those ads on buses and in subways and such in New York, and
I was
they were
there.
just quotes from jihadis because CARE was doing its My Jihad campaign. You know, My Jihad is taking the kids to school on
Mm-hmm.
time, stuff like that. So we had real quotes of jihadis, and one of them was, "My Jihad is," then it was a quote from Hamas, "Killing Jews is worship that brings us closer to Allah." And people actually claimed that we were lying about this and said that we had fabricated the quote. But it's a genuine quote from a genuine Hamas preacher. It's at the Middle East Media Research Institute memory online. You can find it. You can find it quoted and footnoted in I don't know. I'm sure I've put it in some book. But in any case, the reason why I mention it here is because it's the same thing. You're going to think, gentle viewer, that this is over the top or crazy, but David will tell you this is true. If you think about all of the beliefs of Islam, raping an infidel woman is an act of worship. It is a holy act that Allah likes because and blesses because he told them to do it. And also think about what's heaven but a big bordello. Islamic paradise is just having sex all day. And so you have sex. This is something that is like the highest of human experiences. And you're doing it in a way that shows that Islam is dominant and victorious and superior and that Allah has defeated the infidels. What better worship of Allah is can there be than that? And so just like killing Jews is worship, like the Hamas guy said, so also raping infidel women is worship. I've got a lot of quotes from Islamic rapists who are saying that I have one who said pretty much that, actually. I don't know if I can find it in the book real fast. But anyway, the quotes are all here. During the, like one lady says, when he raped me, he repeatedly said, cited Allah, the Quran, and Mecca. In the name of Allah, I swear to you on the Quran of Mecca, and so on. That this is something that that Allah was blessing. Or they would hand them Quran, their victims. They would rape the victims and then give them a Quran. It was either worship or dawah.
Mm-hmm. And
oh, here we go. He told me that according to Islam, he's allowed to rape an unbeliever. He said that by raping me, he's drawing closer to God. There you go.
Sounds about right. Those were I lived in New York. I lived in the Bronx when that whole controversy was going on. So, guys, there was basically you had Muslim organizations. They had their big "Why Islam" campaign. They're posting stuff everywhere, but then they were posting stuff about Israel and so on. And so they're posting basically. Hamas is the good guys and so on. But anyway, you had these ads running. And so then Pamela and Robert demanded that their ads be posted as well. And they refused. And then, if I recall, it went to court or something like that. And they were forced to, because I remembered all of a sudden I would see them. So I used to ride the subway, but you guys' ads were actually in there. They're all over the place and so on. And then they actually had to change their rules, because they were forced, hey, to be consistent, if you're posting stuff from this side, you have to be able to post it from that side. So then they just made it, okay, no kinds of political ads anymore. And so they had to change the rule.
I remember the another campaign we had was people who have left Islam. And we had the pictures of girls who were honor killed and people who had left Islam. And we had a website in those days, leaveislamsafely.com, that offered resources to people like in Rifka Barry's situation who wanted to escape and didn't have anywhere to go. And we actually had a safe house at one time and all kinds of things. And I remember standing on the street in Manhattan one day and I saw one of these cabs go by. And of course, the cab drivers in those days were all Muslim. And so he had the ad on the car, leave Islam safely, but he'd scratched out the leave. So it just said islamsafely.com.
Nice.
And I thought, oh, okay, score one for you, Cabby. You win that.
Yep.
You win this round.
That was good. That's a good one. Got to respect that. All right. So chapters 6 and 7, you have a long history of abuse and so many horror stories.
Yeah, and this is out of Islamic history. So here again, like we were talking about the history of jihad before, this is some stories from throughout Islamic history of how Muslims would conquer and take sex slaves. And This was just a matter of course. This is how Islamic armies wage war. And so this is what they did. And why should we expect that in the modern age it's going to be different? And it isn't.
Um, Chapter 8, we have the real problem. What would the real problem be?
Well, I think chapter 7 gets us to modern day Britain.
Oh, okay.
I
So
did
many horror
want to
stories. Okay.
note that first. Yeah, the so many horror stories is modern day. Chapter 6 is history. And so chapter 7 tells some of the stories, terrible stories out of Britain. You just wouldn't believe it, really, unless you've heard about them. Like this girl made into kebabs in a kebab shop.
I remember that one.
And nobody's ever been brought to justice for that. There were a couple of guys tried, and they were released, and nobody's ever paid any penalty for that at all.
Well, kind
And
of hard to punish someone if the victim ended up as kebabs and you don't have the victim anymore.
yeah, and so you have people around her, you have her family, but then everybody is so afraid of talking about what this problem is, and this is why it is intractable. And this is where we get what we get to in, where is it now?
Chapter 8, the real problem.
Yeah, in chapter 8 we start getting these British politicians who are afraid, or the police who are afraid to deal with it, and so they let it happen. And I've got Jack Straw, who was the home secretary uh, way back in 1997 to 2001, and then foreign secretary after that until 2006. And he, like Sarah Champion, but 10, 15 years earlier, said this is a Pakistani problem. And they crawled all over him, attacked him everywhere. He had to apologize and retract. It's all Islamophobia. And see, it's this whole Islamophobia nonsense that allowed this to happen. That the leftist groups in Britain, Hope Not Hate, Tell Mama, they spread the idea that people like Tommy Robinson, and others who were calling attention to this were the real problem because they were racists and Islamophobes and so on. And so they made it into a problem of white supremacy and racism, and diverted attention away from the rape gangs, obfuscated and lied about who the rapists were. And they're the ones that made this happen. The rapists just took advantage of a situation. If they had been stopped, they would have been stopped. If they'd been deported, they would have there would be no problem. It would have been solved long ago.
It is this amazing situation where no matter what these guys do, they end up as the victims. So they can actually go around grooming, raping, gang raping, drugging, pimping a bunch of 12-year-old girls. And when it eventually gets exposed, they're the victims of white supremacists who are attacking their religion. Absolutely, absolutely insane. So, chapter 8 was the real problem. Then, chapter 9, we've got a veritable industry. What's the industry here?
Well, it's astonishing. There's one town, Rotherham, which between 1997 and 2013, there were 1,400 victims. Now, that's one town. There are hundreds of towns in Britain, and this is why people say that there could be as many as 1 million victims. And there were studies that showed that it was overwhelmingly a Muslim situation, and that it was people who were involved. If it wasn't Muslims doing it, then it was people who were close to Muslims running around in the Muslim community and doing what they did. And yet the report was buried and the whole thing went on. The report that I'm talking about in chapter 9 is from 2014. The J report, it said that this was all about Pakistanis, didn't dare to say Muslims, didn't come close to the ideology, but still it showed honestly who the people were who were doing it, and it all just got covered up in concerns about Islamophobia.
Now, chapter 10, you have Enter Elon Musk. I assume you don't mean in the Zut sense.
Nah, I do not. I have Elon in there because he's the one really. you know, David, Tommy's been talking about this for years. I've been talking about this for years. Other people have been talking about this for years. But the establishment media has been determined to cover it up and ignore it. Everybody in the British establishment has been determined to cover it up and ignore it. So Elon, you know, he has an awfully big platform. He
Hmm.
started talking about it last summer, and suddenly everything started to change. And
Yep.
even the Labour government of Starmer agreed to ultimately, after initially rejecting the idea that it would hold an inquiry, it agreed to hold a national inquiry on this issue, although it looks like it's going to be yet another cover up. But Elon Musk really he shows uh, the power that one individual can have, and why we should all not lose hope. We may not have the kind of platform Elon has, but Elon Musk didn't learn about this from nothing. You
Hmm.
know, he's no doubt seen some of the work that we've done,
Hmm.
and
Oh,
he's
he's
not
I've seen him.
naming.
I've seen him share your tweets before in the past.
There
Yep.
you go.
Hmm.
So this is a call to all of us, really, to persevere. But anyway, in this chapter, I show how he brought pressure on the British government, and the British government actually just a little bit started to move on this.
And yeah, so multiple cool things that Elon did because Twitter, yeah, Twitter. I mean, there's obviously still things that really suck about Twitter or X now, but way worse back in the day. Muslims could be calling for all sorts of screwed up, messed up stuff, and we just responded to it, and I would, we would get banned and so on. And I think it had Elon just going in there and just buying the platform. Um, I think that had ripple effects because
Mhm.
YouTube. I'm not on Facebook, but I hear Facebook is way better now. But on YouTube, YouTube messes with me far, far, far. In fact, they don't mess with me at all anymore compared to years ago where it was just relentless. Everything I posted, they would come after me on. Um, so anyway, it's nope, it's pretty cool, and it is cool that that we can be bringing things up for years and all of a sudden you get someone with just a huge platform and he can shine a massive spotlight on it and then it all gets exposed. So guys, this is kind
Mhm.
of what I'm talking about with things becoming common knowledge. It's things become common knowledge and we're all pointing it out. Guess what? They're going to be people with big megaphones who finally catch on and can shout it to the rest of the world. Chapter 11, you have Islamophobia. You kind of already talked about everyone being terrified of Islamophobia, but yep,
Yeah, this is
the irrational fear of being called an Islamophobe, I presume.
yes, and it's not a repetition of the earlier chapter, but just moving in kind of a chronological way in this section of the book. And so it shows even after Elon, you have people saying this is all Islamophobic and it has to be the real problem are the people calling attention to it and all that's still going on.
And chapter 12, we have life in the new Europe. Obviously, the new Europe,
Okay.
way better than the old Europe.
Oh, yeah. So we have Germany, New Year's Eve 2015 was a huge mass rape all over in Germany, in Cologne, Dusseldorf, Dortmund, and Bielefeld. Also, mass rapes took place that night in Stockholm and other cities in Europe. Germany and Sweden are suffering to a slightly lesser degree the same kind of issues that Britain is. Also, Finland and elsewhere. And even worse, you have the same kind of idiot officials like Henrietta Recker, who was the mayor of Cologne in Germany, who said that what we need to do is make sure that the girls who go out to have fun are better prepared. And so that means that they have to not dress in a way that will provoke the rapists. Well, that's exactly what Islamic authorities have said for years, and that I've got earlier in the book, that it's the women's fault and they have to be careful not to allow themselves to be raped. So she's just a step away from Sharia, this mayor, because she's saying it's the women's responsibility to make sure men aren't tempted and they have to cover up in order to prevent that. It's exactly what Sharia teaches. and why women are veiled in the Islamic world.
So you mentioned Sweden there, but chapter 13 is Sweden succumbs, and
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, Sweden is more in 13.
mhm.
12 is Finland, Germany, mainly Germany. Anyway, so Sweden, same thing. I got Trump saying they got this big problem in Sweden, and everybody ridiculed him. But of course, on that, he was right. He's wrong about getting friendly with Qatar, but he's right about Sweden. And in Malmo in Sweden, it is a terrible situation where, once again, women are in grave danger if they don't go out veiled. And so the integration minister, Mats Persson, he said, we have to teach these people liberal values. This is going to work, right, David?
Oh yeah,
We
oh
have
yeah,
to tell them they got to stop raping.
hmm that'll work.
See, nobody's told them.
Yeah,
They,
see, after looking back when all those girls were kidnapped in Nigeria and how Michelle Obama bravely posted her tweet with the hashtag Bring Back Our Girls, and seeing how remarkably effective that was, just telling people, hey, here's what you need to do, and they're just going to listen because they definitely believe in obeying the kuffar. But yep, it would be the same thing here. Just tell them, hey, guys, who cares what your religion teaches? Stop raping girls, and they'll stop.
yep. And it reminds me of, I mean, even the idiocy on this is so thick. But it's not just idiocy. It's not that they're stupid, they're evil. And they're so afraid, even to this day, of appearing Islamophobic. I've got the story in the book of, it was in Germany. You may have seen the posters. I think we probably talked about them one day on This Week in Jihad. That they had a poster of this big old German lady swimming, and she's groping some poor
One-legged.
migrant.
Didn't he
Yes.
have one leg or something? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, guys, here's how crazy things are over there, right? They want to say, "Hey, don't sexually assault people; it's bad, and don't let people sexually assault you." But they can't say, "Hey, it's migrants doing it to native people." So they can only describe it as, well, if a big German barmaid comes up to you and you're this poor one-legged Muslim immigrant, don't let it happen. And like, okay, we'll put it like that. Maybe they'll get the message that they
Yeah.
bunch of cowards,
So
bunch of cowards.
yeah, and so really, it's just the same story over and over. But I've got it documented all here. Chapter 14 is France,
Well,
and
that's just a paradise, isn't it?
yeah, you would think. And of course, we have what they claim all over, that they didn't know it was illegal. That it's not illegal in their countries, and we'll get to that in the book as well. Chapter 15 is also about France. Always the Maghrebi types. That was what one woman who was a victim said, that she's regularly sexually harassed, sexually assaulted, and it's always people from the Maghreb, that is North Africa, Algeria, Morocco in particular. Excuse me. This is the uh, place where these guys come from, obviously, because this is where they learn these values. And so they think the non Muslim women can be treated in this way with no trouble whatsoever.
And chapter 16 is titled Not Safe Down Under. I think that's what the Al Zut said to Muhammad, but I'm guessing you're talking about Australia.
I am indeed. It is, I admit, a bit of a double entendre, but yes, it's all about Australia. The Scaff Gang. I don't know if you've heard of the Scaff Gang. This goes back to the year 2000,
Yo,
which is kind of an indication.
I wanted to point out, like, before I ever heard about the grooming gangs in the UK, I was hearing stuff about Australia and Scandinavia and so on. It's just the UK grooming gangs eventually got the spotlight, but I just remember all these stories from the early 2000s about guys raping girls on a picnic table in the park and stuff. And these guys would actually get brought to court, and their defense would be, "What do you mean? These aren't good girls. These aren't good girls."
Mm-hmm.
and they had no concept
Well,
that you weren't allowed to gang rape these girls because they're not good girls.
and that's what a lot of the British authorities said. As a matter of fact, police would dismiss complainants and tell the parents of a girl who was raped. They would say, well, she was engaging in prostitution, which was a lie. Or if she was being forced by the Muslims. It was not something she was doing freely. And yet this was something that British authorities just would wave away the issues because they said these women, they're just like that. They're cheap, and so it doesn't matter. And so we got the Scaff gang in Australia. We've got other. Oh, this is one of the Scaff rapists. He says all Australian women are sluts and deserve to be raped because of the way they dress. Well, that's just what the Quran says, that you draw your veil over so you don't get molested.
Everyone is watching right now. I keep pointing out how this has to become common knowledge. I just want to point out how easy Robert has made it for you to do right now. If you're on X or you're on Facebook or something like that, how easy it is when he gives you the quotation. So you quote the rapist, and then you quote the Quran, which says the exact same thing. That's it. That's all you have to do. And then people see it, and then people share it, and then more people catch on. And yeah, I mean, if you only have a few friends or something like that, or a few followers or something like that on X, guess what? If one person reads that who didn't know it before, that's important. Mm. That's important. If 10 people find out about that who didn't know it before, that matter. I mean, just think, let's suppose you have, let's say, 1 million people who actually know what's going on. If every one of those 1 million people go and share that with one person, that's all of a sudden you just doubled your numbers. Mm-hmm. So this is, guys, there's work involved. But this is entirely doable here. So you've got everything you need there. The same story back home. I'm guessing that's America. Back home? Where's back home?
No, that's back home in the Islamic world.
Ah, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That this kind of thing is a pandemic in Pakistan,
mm-hmm.
and in elsewhere in the Islamic world. Where do I have this? I think Pakistan is mostly this chapter. Christian girls are considered goods to be damaged at leisure. That's what the head of the British Pakistani Christian Association said. And so this is something that the Muslim rapists have brought from their home countries. So in a certain sense, they're right when they say in Britain it's a Pakistani problem. But it's not specifically a Pakistani problem because there are non-Pakistani Muslims involved in the gangs, and it happens elsewhere, as the book goes on to show. But Pakistan is an epicenter of it, and that's why Britain has been so hard hit with it, because most of the Muslims there are from Pakistan.
And it is interesting. So there are you've got a few Muslim countries where you have basically a large Christian population, a large Christian minority as well. So Pakistan has a bunch of Christians there. Iraq has a bunch of Christians. Nigeria has a ton of Christians. But I mean, think about that, everyone. Nigeria is, it's a completely different place from Iraq, which is a completely different place from Pakistan. But you still have big Muslim majorities and with lots of Christians still around. Isn't it interesting that in Pakistan, Muslims somehow get the idea that they can do what they want with the Christian girls, and then ISIS in Iraq, when they take up, what do? Well, we can start going around raping and taking people as our sex slaves and so on. Nigeria, you can just there's a school of Christian girls over there. You can just go and take them and do whatever you want with them. We've mentioned this many times before, Robert, but for those who say it's all just a misunderstanding of Islam, isn't it strange that people in completely different places, completely different backgrounds, somehow come to the exact same misunderstanding about what it teaches? Mm-hmm. We point this out because it'll get pointed out. Back in the day, not so much anymore, but 15 years ago, if you said, "Oh, look, these jihadis are terrorizing people," they go, "Oh, but what about Westboro Baptist Church?" Okay, they protest soldiers' funerals and stuff like that. So they're weird. They're a weird group. But notice the point. Uh, One weird group in one spot. The reason you wouldn't say that this actually emerges from Christianity is because if it actually emerged from Christianity, you should see that's the exact same behavior popping up in churches in
Mm-hmm.
Canada and churches in the UK and churches all over the world. You should see it. If it actually flows out of Christianity, if it's just one church on the entire planet who comes up with this idea, chances are it didn't actually come from Christianity. It came from some leader in that church who came up with the idea, and then he
Mm-hmm.
spread it to his followers. But in Islam, it's just weird. I mean, when ISIS raised the flag of jihad, you had all these people in the UK went down and joined them. All these people in France went down and joined them. All these people in Germany went down and joined them. All these people from the United States and Canada. It's weird how there were people in all these countries who had the exact same misunderstanding of Islam as ISIS, and then we're just waiting. They were just waiting for the call, and then no, it's time. It's time to go. How did all these people come to the exact same conclusion? Weird,
Yep.
weird misunderstanders.
And also, what look at what you don't have. Why is there, with this widespread global phenomenon that I document in this book, why is there nowhere a society of Muslims against raping infidel women? I don't know what the acronym for that would be,
That'd be a
but
good one.
why is there nowhere any kind of organization to teach young Muslims that jihad violence is wrong if it's really wrong in Islam, or that raping infidel women is wrong? And the answer is those organizations don't exist because those things aren't wrong in Islam. And so there's no movement against them among Muslims because there are Muslims who don't engage in that behavior. But to find a Muslim who's going to stand up and say something that's allowed in the Quran is wrong, you're going to have to go a long way to find such a Muslim.
Because he'd be a target too, and he knows it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So
And they call
chapter
it.
18, the same phenomena. Yes.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, I got it in India, I got it in Egypt, Sudan, Nigeria, Mozambique, Somalia, and I show that it is the same phenomenon based on the same teachings, and that yes, in this chapter, it's also in the United States. Take, for example, October 2024, Ahmed Yaqub to North Carolina. And in North Carolina, he picked up a 12-year-old girl and a 14-year-old girl, and he was charged with predatory sexual assault against a child less than 13, first-degree rape, forcible compulsion. You know the deal. Dr. Umair Ajaz of Rochester Hills, Michigan, an Indian citizen, arrested in August 2024, suspected of situating hidden cameras in places like hospital rooms, changing rooms, bathrooms, and bedrooms to record women and children. And he also recorded himself sexually assaulting unconscious hospital patients. Now, where do these guys get this idea? And here again, there's rape all over, there's rapists all over, nobody's denying that. But there's so many Muslims, and even guys who are like doctors, respectable people, like this guy I was just reading to you about, who get engaged in this kind of behavior. They do it because it is justified in Islam.
That does seem to be the common feature. Um, Chapter 19, we have denial. I'm guessing that's
And
about
that
people
is,
denying it.
yeah, it's not just the people who are the officials who said, it's Islamophobic to do anything about it. A collection of various people in various countries saying this is all about hating Muslims. This is against. None of this really comes from Islam, and so on. And even the British government investigating people telling the truth about this and persecuting them. And that is something that is going on at this point.
Hmm. Chapter 20, we have the toxic theology that doesn't exist. Well, I'm glad it doesn't exist.
Yes. And so we have, for example, Dr. Taj Hargey, who is the founder of the Oxford Institute for British Islam. He's a moderate Muslim, David, and he says when you have the idea of superiority, of supremacy, of segregationist mentality, then yes, these people go out and do bad things to these young, vulnerable teenage girls, and so on and so on. And he said he was astounded at the idea that any Muslim would think this was the right thing to do. And he said that it was all against Islam. And he's widely quoted even in the so-called right-wing British press, like GB News and all. They quote this guy as if he's a real authority when he's really just another one of these fake moderates. There are a lot of fake moderates in the United States, people who say, rightly understood, Islam teaches peace. You have to really understand the essence of the Quran. People who don't read the Quran, they don't know, and they fall for it. And he's the same kind of thing in Britain now about the rape gangs. That rightly understood, Islam doesn't teach any of this, and it's all un-Islamic behavior.
Yeah, me and AP were just talking about something that I brought up in a video probably 15 years ago or something like that. I think it was called something like Three Questions for Moderate Muslims or something like that. But the main thing I came down to was, what's the difference, practically speaking, what's the difference between a religion that says fight those who do not believe in Allah, and you can take female captives and beat your wives into submission and so on, and it means it? What's the difference between an ideology that says those things and it means it, but what's the difference between that and an ideology that says fight those who do not believe in Allah? You can beat your wives into submission. You can take, sex captives. You can have sex with prepubescent girls and so on. But it doesn't mean it. It means the opposite somehow. And you kind of have to read between the lines to realize, you have to look really closely and figure out that it doesn't mean all those things. Practically speaking, what's the difference between a religion that says these horrible things and means it, and says these horrible things but doesn't mean it? Either way, you're getting the same thing. You're getting the exact same behavior, because it's only a few people who are actually going to study it and go, oh, I realize it. And guess what? In debates, those people are going to lose, because it's their opponents who are violently subjugating people and slaughtering people and so on, who have the quotes to back up what they're saying. And so it doesn't make a difference if you say, oh, I'm the one who really understands Islam. All these guys out here who are doing all the raping and going out to subjugate the world and so on, they all got it wrong. I'm the one who really understands it. Okay, you're irrelevant, and you're actually part of the problem, because you become the cover. You become the cover for these guys and for the ideology.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So there's more of the same in chapter 21, the real victims.
I'm guessing that's chapter. Muslims are the real victims of all this stuff. Is that the real victims?
That's right. Yes. This is it. There's so much of this. You wouldn't believe it, David. This is a British play called Expendable. It was reviewed in The Spectator when it was running in the Royal Court, which is a theater in London's West End. Very famous theater. And it was... The Spectator, in the review, they said that this play is an urgent bulletin from the front line of the grooming gang scandal in the north of England. Okay, so this is what how the Spectator describes what's going on in this play. White thugs. Okay, hold on. The setting: a kitchen in Yorkshire, where Zara is trying to keep her family together after her son, Raheel, was outed as a rape suspect by a national newspaper. White thugs dump parcels of excrement on their porch, and Zara cowers under the kitchen table, too scared to answer the door. The racists have mounted a mass demonstration, supported by the cops, which causes local bus services to be canceled. This is just plain inversion of reality, 100%. Nobody was intimidating the rapists or their families, but plenty of the victims and people who were advocating for the victims were intimidated, and the authorities came down on them as well.
Chapter 22, you got To This Day.
Still happening. That's what is documented in that even though Elon Musk called attention to it, even though there's far more discussion of it than there was, it is still going on even now. And that is not just that the rapes are being done, but that the cover up and the fear of Islam continues.
And finally, you have chapter 23. What is to be done? That's a good question there.
Yeah, I stole that from Lenin. Um, the well,
Wait,
he
wait, wait,
stole
wait,
it
wait,
from that
wait.
other guy anyway.
Wait, wait,
Yeah,
wait, 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 wait. The communist Lenin or the beetle Lenin?
the communist.
Oh,
He
okay.
wrote a
That's good.
book back right before they took power called "What Is to Be Done," and I always thought, what a good title. I think I've used it before. It's a good last chapter of the book title. But anyway, what is to be done? It's really just common sense stuff. Stop being afraid, make the hard choices, speak honestly about this, be willing to carry out the deportations and enforce the law, all those kinds of things. It shouldn't even need to be said, but since it's not happening, these are very easy steps that could be taken that would heal British society and all the others if they were done. But people just don't have the guts to do it.
So you actually lay out a plan that would solve some of these problems.
Yeah, I mean, if you're, I'm talking about very specifically, you engage in a rape gang activity in Britain, immediately deported. You're a naturalized citizen, you're stripped of your citizenship. You're a native, life in prison, maybe execution. You have to make it something that really does deter. And you know, David, being in prison before, a couple of years in prison is not a deterrent for most people who are criminals. They figure they can do that standing on their heads, and they get back out, and they'll be more trained in criminality than before. So you have to make it so that they have no future at all, no chance of any future in Britain or wherever they may be. And so that would involve all those things that I mentioned just now, the deportations and enforcing the law. All these things are illegal. And yet people are so afraid to enforce the law because they're afraid of being called Islamophobic. Britain has to become indifferent to charges of Islamophobia, but instead it's making law criminalizing Islamophobia. And so people are going to be going to jail for talking about this instead of the people who are doing it going to jail.
And yeah, so I mean, I've mentioned as far as things that definitely need to happen. One, this has to become common knowledge. If these arguments and these claims only work in an atmosphere of ignorance, then get rid of the atmosphere of ignorance, and then they no longer work. But yet the uh, the flip side of that is people have to stop stop being scared of things like being called Islamophobes and so on, because that's what that's what protects the atmosphere of ignorance. That's what keeps the atmosphere of ignorance alive and well. And it's just it's crazy that we're over here in the U.S. and we look over at what happened in the U.K. and you made so many people, journalists, politicians, social workers, police, terrified of ever questioning or criticizing anything any Muslim does, to the point where they would rather let thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of young British girls be raped, drugged, pimped, all that stuff. Then they would rather do that than be called names. And here we are in the U.S. where things aren't nearly that bad. But what are groups like CARE doing? After every Islamic terrorist attack for decades now, it's been, if you criticize this at all, if you criticize Islam, if you criticize what Muslims do, and so on, then you're a racist, Islamophobic, hate mongering bigot. They're trying to set up the same system here, where any
Yep.
Muslim can do anything he wants, and you can't say anything about it. Or you'll be called names and so on. So, guys, we cannot let that happen here. Can't under any circumstances. So you got to stand your ground on that, ladies and gentlemen. That's a hill. That's a hill to die on. You do not budge off that hill. There are certain. I remember certain. I watched that Ken. What's his name? Ken Burns. That Ken Burns giant series on the Civil War. Actually had it in prison in the library. I watched the entire thing, but there were situations where it would be, we have to hold this hill, or we lose this entire battle. And it would just, there would not be a
Mhm.
lot of people there, but they would understand we have to fight to the death on this hill, because if we lose this hill, we're all gone. We're all gone. And so there was that. Matter of fact, that was Chamberlain's charge. That was Chamberlain's
Mhm.
charge. They got to the point where like they didn't even have enough bullets and stuff when the guys are coming up the hill. He said, "Fix bayonets," and they did a charge with their bayonets. They said, "We cannot lose this one right here." So anyway, this guys, it's a time when everyone needs to take a stand, and there are certain issues everyone has to take a stand on. Um, yep. And Robert just gave you an awesome resource. He's given you plenty of awesome resources in the past for things like jihad and so on. If you are especially interested in this topic, which you should be, there need to be more people who are exposing this stuff. He's got an awesome resource. Again, it's not terribly complicated. Start sharing this stuff on social media. Even if you don't have a big following, you share it. Guess what? Someone will reshare it. Someone will quote tweet that, and so on, and then that'll expose it to more people, and then eventually someone with a significantly bigger channel will share it, and then more people will see it, and so on. That's all. We just need a bunch of people doing that. That's how you change people's minds over time. All right, Robert, I don't know. I know you retire early. You retire early sometimes. So I'm going to go through super chats, but I don't know if you want to hang out or cut out.
Yeah, I'll stick around. It's I haven't been around for a while, so it's
Oh
nice
yeah,
to
that's
see
good. That's good. And I
everybody.
know some of these are for you and so on. All right, let's check out these guys. Are you familiar with Sarah Adams, aka Superbad? She's former CIA and outspoken on the dangers of Islamic extremism. I am not, but I like the nickname Superbad. You familiar with her?
I'm not familiar with her other than having seen her work on Twitter. Looks like she's doing great work, and so more power to her. I support her completely in regard to her fighting against Islamic Jihad. I hope she doesn't call it extremism, because it ain't extremism; it's mainstream. And if she's knowledgeable about it, she knows exactly what I mean by that.
And that is important. And you already mentioned this, but people think there's Islam and then there's extremist Islam, and the extremist Islam is what you need to worry about. No, there's Islam, and then there's what you could call like Islam light or something like that, which is,
Mhm.
it's not real. It's not real Islam. So it's not real Islam and then this radical version of it. No, there's Islam, which is already radical, and then the people who have watered it down into some, Walt Disney version of Islam. Let's see. We have a question for you, Robert. Is it true that after you beat David Wood in a debate, he was too embarrassed to continue the Jihad Watch show?
It is true. No,
Humiliated.
I stopped this week in jihad because I haven't been altogether well, and also I have thousands of things to do, and it just became a thing. So I had to decide which things am I going to offload, and so that's what got the axe. I hope someday to be able to pick it back up, do some other videos. Things would have to open up a little bit in terms of schedule, and we'll see how they develop.
And I've already pointed out when people have brought it up, it's like, guys, if Robert already over on his website, jihadwatch.org, is putting together all the stories, so he's already doing most of the work for you. Anyone out there who wants to make a This Week in Jihad show and just quote all the articles and stuff, it's kind of wide open for anyone to jump in there and do that.
Yeah, I tell you, when I was doing this week in jihad, I was kind of amazed at how many people would ask, "Where do you have any sources for all this? Where are you getting these stories?" And I would think, come on, jihadwatch.org has been there every day for 22 years, documenting jihad activity. It's still there. You want the sources, they're all there. And so you're looking for the stories, they're all there. But it just showed. I understand. Video is a much bigger medium right now. People are not reading, they're watching videos. So maybe I should be doing videos and not writing. But, if you can ride a bike and everybody's driving race cars, but you're good at riding bikes, maybe you just don't want to switch over. And
Hmm.
Anyway, there we
No,
are.
it's same thing. People tell me, no, you need to be on this platform. Well, I kind of just know YouTube, guys.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, if I'm going to be on other platforms and stuff, it's got to be someone there, like doing most of that for me, and I'll just provide a little content, and then they can run and do it. Guys,
Mhm.
massive protests in Iran, and people are calling the name of Prince Reza Pahlavi.
Very exciting. We can pray that they succeed. Really, the United States government ought to be giving them every kind of support. The Iranian people have protested in the past. Obama refused to support them. He wanted to help the Islamic Republic. Trump is clearly not on the side of the Islamic Republic, not sending them money. We sent them $20 billion while Biden was president. That was criminal, and that's not happening. But I hope that he's giving the people that are protesting all the possible support that they very much need, because they're completely isolated and it's an extremely repressive regime. So do keep them in your prayers.
Yep, and I've been saying for a while now, there are lots of places in the Middle East where because we tried. Hey, let's just topple the government and put a Western friendly government in, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Why? Because you got a population that really
Never
wants
would.
Sharia and so on. Iran is
Hmm.
the place more than any other place I can think of in the Middle East where it looks like a regime change would be a massive. I'm not saying go in and do the regime changes. I think it has to come from the people. But anything you can do to support the people, even if it's just shouting out support from them, for support for them and so on, so on social media, that's a place where it'll work. It seems like it'll work. It seems like they could have a very different
Hmm.
government, and that it would be a much better, much safer place and much better place for the world. Because there aren't many places that are more screwed up for the world than Iran. But that's because they're leaders who
Hmm.
suck, not because of the people who are very frequently pretty good and awesome. Oh, whoops. Hang on. Had that. I thank God for men like you standing up for women. Our testimony is worth half a man, so we can't do it alone. That's right. Epstein Island was actually Sharia approved, mutta. Oh, I forgot. I wanted to do a video called If You Thought Epstein Island Was Bad, Check Out Islamic Paradise. I read this article on Islam QA, and I put it in a longer video, but I wanted to focus just on this. But Islam QA, they were talking about it's I think Surah 78 verse 33, which talks about the maidens of
Yeah.
paradise having swelling breasts. And so lots of people
Hmm.
interpret that as large breasts, but you have all these Muslim commentators who said, no, 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 it's budding breasts. It's actually a technical term for a stage of development when a girl just starts to her breasts
So they're yeah.
just start to bud. But guess what? These are the virgins that you spend eternity deflowering, and so they're all Tanner stage 2 on the puberty scale. You spend
Hmm.
eternity deflowering. Tanner stage 2 Horties, virgins. Interesting. Let's see. No zut should be the new no homo. Oh, instead of saying, yeah, you have people say, hey, I love you, man, no homo. So, yeah. So
Oh,
now,
I was wondering what that
yeah.
meant. I'm
Now we'll
so out of
say,
touch.
love you, man, no zut, though. That'd be good. Uh, what do you think of divine right of kings? Well, there is a sense in which governments are instituted by God and have authority and so on, but that doesn't mean that governments get to do whatever they want. And you see that with the Apostle Paul himself, who's the one who said it. Because you
Hmm.
saw when the Apostle Paul stood before the Roman governor and he said, "If I've done anything deserving of death, I do not hesitate to die. But if I haven't, no one has a right. No one has a right to hand me over to these guys." And so he believed that you are still under obligations to do the right thing and can be called out if you don't. Let's see. Quran 33:59 covering is a molestation protection. Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Robert's
And
already pointed
so
out.
not covering is a molestation permission.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You're basically saying molest me.
Hmm.
Return of Pahlavi to Iran would be a lot of damage to Islam, this time in a zut sense.
It
Yep.
would be a lot of damage to Islam, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Fall of the Islamic Republic would be the biggest setback Islam has faced since the destruction of the caliphate.
Mm-hmm. Robert, I'm an Iraq war veteran. I saw Christian churches in Baghdad in 2005. I think they were Chaldeans. Are they still there or did they relocate?
Some of them are still there, but many fewer. In 2005, there were 1,000,003. That is 1,300,000 Christians in Iraq. Now there are about 200,000. Many of them were killed. Most of them fled. The toppling of Saddam Hussein turned out to be a really big mistake because the Saddam Hussein was a secular ruler. I'm not saying he wasn't a bad guy. He
He
was a
was a
very
scumbag.
bad guy.
Hmm.
He was a tyrant, but he did not kill the Christians. He let the Christians alone. The jihad groups wanted to institute Sharia
Hmm.
after he was gone, and they wanted to subjugate the Christians. They killed many. They made life so miserable for the rest that most of the Christians fled. And so the ancient Christian community in Iraq that goes back to the time of the apostles has been decimated, may never recover.
Yep, and that is a chronic problem of Western governments. And we think, hey, you know what worked for us? We'll get rid of the tyrant, and then freedom and democracy will flourish. So obviously it'll work over there, and they don't realize you got a completely different kind of population, and that you take someone like Saddam or someone like that, and oh, he's an evil dictator. Yeah, but he's keeping the jihadis. The jihadis are terrified of him because if you cross him, all of a sudden there's tanks rolling into your village the next day and wiping out, you know, everyone who's a part of it and so on. So he kept those guys in check. And then you get rid of him and you say, let's have this Western friendly government. That'll work. And they're not scared of those guys. They're not scared of those guys. And then
Yeah.
those guys get overthrown. Um, Andrew Clavin theorized that false virtue is one of the greatest motivators. Explains why people don't want to be called Islamophobic. Yeah, it is. I mean, just keep in mind all the people saying, "Hey, no, don't say anything about Islam. You're an Islamophobe." They think they're the good ones. They think they're the good people. And what are they doing? It's exactly what Robert's title is. They're the enablers of all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sick, evil stuff.
So it's all the more reason why it's very important to have a moral compass that's genuine, that's not based on the newspapers or current events, that you have a moral compass that comes from Christianity, you have a moral compass that comes from even, you know, any other religion, not Islam, then you know what the values are. You know what is good and what isn't. C.S. Lewis wrote a very interesting little book, very short book, very important book called The Abolition of Man. And one of the most important things about it is that, as short as it is, it's got an appendix that shows how the moral teachings of all the world's religions are pretty much the same. Don't kill, don't commit adultery, don't steal, etc., etc., etc. And he's got quotations from the Hindus, from the Jews, from the Christians, and most because Islam does not teach the same moral values. And so, people, anyway, what I'm saying is don't be blown by the prevailing winds of whatever's fashionable virtue nowadays, but ground your moral compass in what's real and what's stronger than that.
Mm-hmm.
Homophobia nonsense or things like it.
Yeah, Patrick says, I'm extremely tired of all the Muslim taqiyya that's so prevalent on X these days. My brother bought me Sharing Jesus with Muslims for Christmas. Now I see there's another book I need to pick up. Yep, there is. And let's,
32 other books you need to pick up.
yep, quite a few. Robert, why do feminists not confront Islam?
I don't know why they don't, but I do know that there is a hierarchy that I've observed over the years among the values of the left. You know, they're worried about racism, they're worried about feminism, they're worried about homophobia, they're worried about all these things, and yet there's a hierarchy. Some are more important than others. And if you look at what they talk about and what they don't, and in what contexts, you see that being Islamophobic is the worst sin on the left.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why that is, I think that it ultimately comes down to the shared vision of both of them, that they are both authoritarian systems, that is, leftism and Islam, that they're both authoritarian systems that want to set up an earthly utopia by means of a reign of terror, and that they thus are blood brothers deep down. And the feminists, they are very upset about feminism in the West, but when it comes to Muslim women, they start talking about the hijab as a choice and all this nonsense. And they completely ignore wife beating and everything else that's sanctioned in the Quran. Islam trumps feminism. Islam trumps racism. Islam trumps everything on the leftist hierarchy of virtues and vices. And so this is a fact. I'm not quite sure why it is, but there it is.
Why do leftist academics shill for Islam? Do you think they're bought off? Do you think deep down they know Islam is a horrible ideology? Are they afraid? Well, I mean, you don't have to pay anyone off if you just convince them that it's they're the good guys if they constantly defend Islam.
A lot of them are bought off because Qatar has spent millions and millions of dollars to fund American universities. And they're buying the professors talking about Islam being wonderful. They buy influence in the Middle East Studies Department. So, yeah, a lot of them have the conviction because their virtue, their moral compass comes from the modern left. And so they think they're doing the right thing when they shill for Islam. A lot of them are bought. The universities are bought, so they only hire people who are true believers, not necessarily hardline Muslims, although they hire a lot of those as well, but just people who will parrot this line, whether from the left or from the Islamic standpoint, that Islam is peaceful, wonderful, and benign, and Islamophobia is the real problem. I don't
What
know. There might be some who think deep down and they know they got to go along. There are always cowards in the world. But mostly, I think probably in the universities today, you got true believers.
The less you know about Islam, the more you're an expert on Islam. That, David, explains the Canadian government, media, and education system. Yes, it does. Why does the British government have a fascination with Islam? Is it because of T.E. Lawrence? Why does Charles have a strange liking of Islam? I seriously doubt it's because of T.E. Lawrence. It's just,
Well, there is certainly a romanticization of Islam that goes back to the middle of the 19th century in Britain, that goes back to the Crimean War. And you can read about this in the history of jihad because the Crimean War, the British wanted to fight the Russians in alliance with the Ottoman Empire, but they knew that a lot of the British people would never accept an alliance with the Ottoman Empire because they remembered about jihad in those days. And they thought we shouldn't be allying with jihadis. What are you crazy? And so the British government started in the middle of the 19th century to spread Islam is peace propaganda to win people over to supporting the alliance with the Ottomans in the Crimean War. And so it does start from that. Now, later on, you have that they turned against the Ottomans and wanted to topple them and aid the Arabs who were fighting against the Turks in World War One. And so they still romanticized Islam, and that's where T.E. Lawrence comes in because they were the fighting for the Wahhabis with the Wahhabis against the Ottomans, and the Wahhabis were, of course, presenting themselves as the real, true Muslims. And so, in every step of the way, Britain, for its own self interest, has sided with forces that promoted Islam and ended up promoting Islam itself.
jihad is a culinary dish which is cooked very, very, very slowly in the kitchen. Mujahid is basically someone who French would call chef otherwise. Capiche? Yep.
Okay.
Cooking up jihad. The research you and Boston do is phenomenal.
Thanks. If that's for me, thanks.
That is for you.
Boston indeed does great work.
Islam is what Islam does. Muslims do Islam. That's one thing I know about that.
That's true. Actually, that's how Arabic works. That a mu is somebody who does whatever it is. So you've got Islam, and then somebody who does Islam is a Muslim. See, and you've got Hamad, that's praise, and somebody who is praised is Muhammad. And you've got jihad, and somebody who does jihad is a mujahid.
Mm-hmm.
So you see, this is well. Anyway, Arabic is of course the language of Allah. So how could it be bad?
It's very powerful. David, if Mo was stupid to eat lamb cooked by a woman whose husband he killed, isn't the U.S. equally stupid to bring in Afghans where U.S. was involved 20 years? Yeah, I'm in this weird thing. I'm in this weird situation because I think if someone helped you and so on, you should try to protect them when things break down. But you got this problem of, we'll just bring a bunch of them over here. And we've already seen it starting, but you're going to have some of those guys who realize, wait a minute, I spent all those years helping the United States kill my fellow Muslims, and then the fellow Muslims won, and I have to stand before Allah explaining why I helped the great Satan kill Muslims. And then, is there any way out of this? Is there any way to solve this problem? Yeah, go die while waging jihad. That's the only
Hmm.
solution for you. And so you're going to have some of these guys, and again, it's already started. You're going to have more of these guys go on killing sprees because after siding with the United States and then coming over here and then realizing they've got a problem with Allah now because they were fighting their fellow Muslims, they're going to look for the way out, and Islam gives a way out.
There you go.
I can't wear perfume. It triggers my asthma. Well, you'd have been safe from Muhammad. Not
He
really, though.
wouldn't have cared about your asthma.
Isn't asking for Palestine from river to sea equals shirk when Palestine doesn't even exist in the Quran, trying to create something which Allah didn't create? No, Islam is supposed to take over stuff. And if Islam, Robert's been saying this for over 20 years, it's built into Islam that if Islam has once controlled a territory, then even if it gets retaken by someone else, you have to drive them out from whence they drove you out. So you are obligated to wage jihad against that place until you bring it back under the fold of Islam.
Yep. And Palestine actually was invented. I mean, Palestine wasn't. Palestine was just the name of a region. But the Palestinians were invented as a propaganda tool to wage the jihad against Israel. And so that's the only reason why they exist.
Only thing extremists understand is conflict and battle to back off, so meet them halfway on all fronts, debate, self-defense, and deport.
I don't know about that meeting halfway bit. I don't want to meet them halfway at all.
Islam is double negative of victimhood.
Hmm.
Robert, will your book be on Audible?
Probably, but I don't know. Audible always decides that. And, sometimes, I mean, I never get any notice. Like Anti Semitism, History, and Myth didn't come out on Audible for like a year after it came out. And I thought, oh, they decided not to put that out on Audible. And then it just came out on Audible like last week. So you never know. It probably will, but it might be a while.
Thank you for speaking out for us. I hate how unsafe I feel in my own country that used to be safe. Much love from Finland.
Thank you.
Yep, that's a lot of places right now. Sweden succumbs, much like Muhammad on the night of Al-Zut. Dang it, David, I'm a pastor. You turned me into this. You're welcome. Zalan here again, who's a Muslim, says, I just bought the Kindle version. Thank you. By the way, the Muslim prayer mats have all these weird figures that really look like demons with horns and Satan. Can you guys comment on this since Muslims don't? Well, I haven't seen I haven't looked at their prayer mats. So, I mean, I've seen prayer mats, but I'm not sure what you're talking about there.
Yeah, I've never seen horns and Satan on a prayer mat, but it is a demonic thing. So I wouldn't be really all that surprised if you see something like that in there.
Yeah, I will take a closer look next time, though. Middle name of grape is Muhammad. Peaceful Islam is emotional fallacy. Miss and love your poems, Robert. Yeah. My neighbor has...
I was just trying to come up with something other than saying TikTok time to rock. And it ended up being these poems. Now, oh.
Classic. My neighbor has scarlet macaw named Hassan al-Banna.
That's funny. He was the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, folks.
Cool guy. We need a Tawhidi versus Spencer interview. Yeah, talking about the Amman.
Oh, I'd love that.
Yeah.
I bet he wouldn't do it, but I would love to do it if he were to agree. But I would highly doubt he would. He used to be out on Twitter a lot, and he would say all this stuff that was a lot of nonsense. And I would quote Quran and ask him about, well, what about this and that? And he never would engage. He didn't really want to get into it, and it's understandable why. Because if you have knowledgeable people who know what the Quran really says, they're not going to fall for what he's saying.
Making baby would stop the legitimacy of immigration, but feminism has done so much damage. Propaganda against Islam and pro-baby are urgently needed. That is true. Elon's actually been pushing that as well, saying, guys, got to have more kids. Guys, it's just a rule.
Baby.
Yeah, if you're not having enough babies to replace the people who are dying, your government is not going to let your population decline. They're going to bring in other people. And that's kind of what's ironic about feminism and so on is, hey, let's do things this way because we want these feminist ideas and so on. Okay, if you reduce the birth rate and your government brings in people who ultimately are going to destroy feminism, what were you thinking?
This is another thing the governments should be doing. They should be encouraging people to have large families, giving them tax breaks,
Mhm.
making it easier for them. Instead, they make it more burdensome so people don't want to deal with having children. And that ends up with the decline of Western civilization. Here we
Mhm.
are.
Yep. Glory be to Lord Jesus Christ, our God and Savior. Amen. Yep.
Amen.
Thank you so much for this book. I don't read books often, but this one really seems to be worth it. Thanks for fighting for the kingdom. God bless you.
Thank you.
Wahabi, isn't that the spicy green stuff you put on sushi?
You know, I used to say that all the time. I'm going to buy some Wahhabi peas. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And please do a second "Did Muhammad exist?" debate. Well, we did this the
Yeah.
one you
That
saw.
was the second.
Yeah, the one you saw recently was the second debate because Robert had two books on it, and we debated after each one came out.
Mhm.
Um, all right, so yep, that's all the super chats. Final thoughts on everything, Robert?
Well, thank you, David. That's a real good, thorough discussion of the book, and I appreciate it because, really, you're one of the only people that's going to talk about this. Even after all this, there's hundreds of thousands of girls' lives destroyed in Britain, untold numbers everywhere else, and people are still afraid to talk about it. So, thanks.
And as we've mentioned numerous times, guys, it's not just the people following Islam who are doing this. That's the problem. It's the enablers. And guess what?
Hmm.
If the thing that helps the enablers is an atmosphere of ignorance, then if we remain ignorant, we're part of the system that enables these guys. So don't be an enabler. Learn the material and call out the enablers. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Western nations, guys, we still get to vote. We still get to choose
Hmm.
which journalists we pay attention to. We have a lot of power. We just need the ultimate enemy of Islam is an informed population of free people. Islam can't deal with that. That's why they always, always, always have to silence you. They always have to go for blasphemy laws and so on. They can't stand up to criticism. So learn to criticize it. And if enough people learn to criticize it, we win. All right, guys. So get the book. The link is in the description box. And again, whether you want to learn it all and use it all, or you're just interested in one particular topic and you want to learn that, well, my goodness, get a copy. He's done the work for you. He's got the quotations. He's got the sources. It will be very hard for people to argue against you when it says, well, my Muslim friend, and you've got all the information backed up by all the research. So it's all there. Grab the book. Links in the description. And we'll catch you all next time.